Hello and welcome to episode 536 of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. My name is Seth Paridon, historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum, and with me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, that's you, author, historian, and good buddy, John Parshall. How are you this Friday evening,
Yeah,
John?
evening, afternoon, whatever it is, I'm fine. My sync pack says that I'm fine. So yeah, Q&A, let's do it, baby.
Awesome. Awesome. And joining us, not for the first time, but for the first time for our Q&As, is our mutual good buddy. We just had him on, I don't know, 3, 4 weeks ago to talk about the Army of Pearl Harbor. It's our
Yeah.
good pal, absolutely amazing historian and professor, John McManus. How are you, John McManus?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. Always good to hang out with you, and especially the esteemed John Parshall. I mean,
Mhm.
that is
They
an
don't come
Yeah.
much
appropriate
more
word
esteemed
for
than
this
John.
gentleman in his purple shirt.
Yeah, there you go. And we were just hanging out together a couple of weekends ago at that conference in Richmond. So that was fun to see you there too. So
Yeah, it was a good time.
yeah.
It was a good, really good time. It was the America's History LLC World War II conference. Um,
Yeah,
Very cool.
although unfortunately I just found out today that that was the last one.
Oh, really?
Yes,
That's for
sir.
sure.
Yes, sir.
How did you find that out? What happened?
Talked to Ed Langle, actually. So
Mm,
anyway, there you go.
good source.
Bummer.
Yep.
Maybe sometime in the future. Yeah.
Mm.
But anyway,
Bummer.
it was good to see
All
you.
right. Our MC is with us as always, my oldest friend in the world, United States Army retired Major Cav officer, tour in the sandbox, Shawn Bergstrom. How are you, Shawn?
I'm doing good, ready to rock. You just let me know when I've got the concept.
You have it. Go.
Now that this is Dr. McManus's first Q&A with us, Doctor, tell us a little bit about how you got into your profession and just a little bit about yourself, but more importantly, what drew you to the Pacific Army? How did that come to be for you?
Yeah, so a couple elements to that. I was the kid who was reading about World War II. Any book I could get my hands on. I was just really into it for some reason. I guess we're all the same. I was very interested in soldiers and what the war was like for soldiers, and it just seemed like like when we were kids, not a lot of the books lent themselves in that direction. So that's kind of what excites me to explore. I actually I was a journalism student in college. I got a journalism degree, not history. I really should have gotten a history degree. I wasn't a good journalism student at all, but I took any history that I could. And it took me a couple of 3 years to figure out that I really ought to be going the history route after college, and went to grad school in that direction and decided there's nothing more important to study than the the military experience, which is a lot of different things. For me, it tends to be combat soldiers and their world and what motivates people and what this is like for them and how it affects people. So how I end up with the Pacific, it just in doing a lot of books over the years, it was, I mean, you can probably all relate to this. Like something, it's in the back of your mind, but it's not, you don't quite fully understand it. And so I had done a lot of research actually on the Army in the Pacific over the years, and I didn't quite realize I was doing that much research. And it kind of occurred to me, always trying to do something original, that we had this kind of really skewed understanding of what the war against Japan was. That there was idea that it was the Navy's war and that all the land fighting was done by a few good Marines and that was it. And actually, that couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, it's just a massive army that fights and does the logistical side and the engineering and the medical, on it goes. So I thought this needs to be explored, and it ends up as a trilogy, so that tells you the scope of the story.
Awesome. Well, as an Army vet, I appreciate you enlightening Seth and John that the Pacific War wasn't just won by the Marines and the Navy. So I thank you.
Mhm.
Um,
My
if you could
pleasure.
have dinner with three people from the Pacific, who would they be? We've had this at a previous question. I wanted to ask you. You could sit down with three guys at dinner. Who would they be for you?
Well, I'm gonna start with two guys from the brass. Robert Eichelberger for sure. He is
Oh yeah.
yeah. I mean, the commander of Eighth Army by the end of the war. He's a three-star. He's a lieutenant general. He's kind of the hero of the Battle of Buna in 1942 and 43. He was glib, he was fun to be around, apparently. And he's just, I mean, his recollections of World War II were just voluminous. I just think it'd be really interesting to talk with him about that. One of the division commanders who always intrigued me is a guy named A.D. Bruce, who commanded
Yeah,
the 77th Infantry Division.
Yeah.
And I just
sure.
think he's just fascinating. I think he's an innovative commander. I think he's aggressive. I think he works well with the other services. He seems to inspire his soldiers, and I think those are a pretty darn good unit that saw a lot of combat. The other one is a lower ranking person who ends up being a high ranking person, Harold K. Johnson. I'm not sure how much you guys have heard about him, but
Mm.
Harold K. Johnson was a West Pointer class of 1933. And so he was with the Philippine Division at the beginning of the war. And
Okay.
so he's like an operations officer at the battalion and then the regimental level. And then he's kind of a battalion and regimental commander in the just the absolute chaos of that 41-42 campaign. And he ends up as a POW and he gets down to under 100 pounds. It's just a horrible experience. But what's interesting to me about him, of course, that's about the worst experience and situation you could be in. And yet he becomes more ethical. He becomes a better leader. He becomes more accountable. He's really truly an amazing person. And that shines through. And, he fortunately survives the war. And he ends up as the Army Chief of Staff, 20 some odd years later in the
Oh,
1960s.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, really interesting guy.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's rock. Question number one, and as everyone always knows, I love the short questions that are poignant and to the point. So if you're one of the first 7 or 8, you have made the Shawn Bergstrom cut of great questions. Question one: if we had lost the Battle of Edson Ridge, would we have lost the canal? Do not dare give yes or no answers, gentlemen. Do what you are good at. Expound, please. And remember, Admiral Lee ain't blind. This is from Kurt W. Go.
I don't think so.
No. No,
Or
neither.
at least it's arguable. The bottom line is that even if they take that ridge, even if they overrun First Mardiv's headquarters, there's still several battalions of Marines across the Sound garrisoning Tulagi at that point, and the majority of the division remains unfought, and particularly we still have the majority of our artillery functional at that point. So, do I think it presents First Mardiv with a supreme command crisis? Yeah, absolutely, but I don't think it necessarily dooms that enclave.
I
Well,
don't think so either. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead. Go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Seth. No, no, go
I
ahead.
was going to say I don't think so either because Fifth Marines are still they do take part in Edson's Ridge, but there's still the vast majority of Fifth Marines that are still away from that ridge and they're on the other side of that airfield. So there's still a lot of fighting power there just on the island at that one moment in time. So I don't think it dooms them. I think it certainly, as you say, puts a monkey wrench in the plans, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And plus, you can always get it back. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be a heck of a fight, I'm sure. But I mean, how would that have been materially all that much different than what you're going to see later around Mount Austin, and the Gifu Strong Point, and these pieces of high ground that we simply have to have going forward? I don't know. To me, you're going to have an American reaction to that.
No,
Cool.
agreed.
Do we know Japan's backup plan for its Pearl Harbor attack force if it had been detected, or if weather was too bad to launch the attack on Sunday morning? Thanks, WM Denver.
Um, if they were detected, it depends on kind of where they were detected, but if they're fairly proximate to the objective, they fight their way in. That was the game plan. I do not know of what the backup plan was if the weather is too crummy on Sunday to launch. I don't honestly know if they had a plan B. So there you go.
Yeah, not to my
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah. And the weather was crummy that morning too. And
pretty bad.
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
How many Japanese military personnel were captured and held as prisoners of war by the Allied powers in the Second World War, and where were they held? I would also be interested in any information about how they were treated. This is from Bill B. So we're not looking for the exact number, gents, but
Good.
I think we're not looking for that, but roundabout.
I could speak to it a little bit. On the eve of the Battle of Okinawa, I think we had 7,400 Japanese military personnel in American custody at that point in time. There's several hundred others in Australia at that point. And of course, well, you have a really kind of infamous circumstance where some of them have an uprising, break
Right.
out of their camp, and our friend Matt McLaughlin has written about that, an Australian historian. So you have that. I don't know how many that Japanese that involve, but I do know there's about 7,400 in American custody as of April of 45. Now, where are they? They're sprinkled around, I think, in two or three different camps, but I know particular there was one on Oahu. And so that is just a small camp of Japanese military personnel who are there who are being treated according to the Geneva Convention, and thus pretty well, a lot better than the Japanese were treating American and other Allied POWs.
Yeah.
So then, of course, on Okinawa, you end up capturing,
Yes.
several thousand more, mainly at the end of the battle in the supposed mop-up phase. But if we're expanding the scope, the truly mind-blowing thing is, of course, when the Soviets entered the war on
Mm.
August 9th, 1945, they come into Manchuria, and you're talking about tens of thousands of Japanese. I think
Hundreds
it's
of
pretty well
thousands.
into six figures. How many, John?
Hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a museum in Tokyo actually that we take our guests to that details the experience of the soldiers and civilians that were captured by the Soviets during that campaign. And yeah, it's hundreds of thousands of people. And they end up basically being injected into the gulag system.
Mhm.
And so there's a map in this museum that details the locations of these people. And I mean, they're not in Eastern Soviet Union. In many places, they're putting them on trains and they're taking them all the way out into Central Russia and what have you. It's crazy. And a lot of them are going to be several years in captivity. Tens of thousands of them do perish. In fact, if you look at the breakdown of Japanese civilian casualties, it's about 800,000 people in total that are killed, and 40% of them are dead at the hands of the Soviets. So it's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is just mind-blowing. And
yeah,
the thing that's
something like that.
curious about it, that I think this is another element of World War II that I think requires more explanation.
Yeah,
Why were the Japanese so loath to surrender pretty much everywhere in the war up to this point in time? And yet, when the Soviets come in, now you're talking about in the hundreds of thousands.
right.
Why and how did that happen is something I just can't answer.
Yeah. I think some of that is probably due to the fact that they're, seeing the collapse of resistance in the home islands, if you will. There's the surrender that happens, in the middle of August. And the thing that a lot of people sort of lose track of is that yes, the Soviets attack on the night of 8 August, but or 9 August, excuse me, it's sort of in the morning. That offensive takes really a couple of weeks to kind of develop. The sort of the Western haymaker of that whole thing is coming out of way out in Mongolia, and so it takes those pincers a long time to sort of come together down in the southern part of Manchuria, and they just encapsulate these huge groups of Japanese troops and civilians, and yeah, basically all of them go into captivity, and it's grim. It's really grim.
Yeah, there
I
was
can do some I can do some real time history on this too. I actually just did a presentation on this. So why don't we go ahead and answer something else, and I'll find the numbers.
I do, John, didn't they like after we seized Manchuria, Japan started colonizing, basically sending tens of thousands of people into
Oh
Manchuria,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah. No, and they pump a lot of money into Manchuria too. This is one of the things that Rich Franks talks about in Tower of Skulls, is that if you look at the amount of money that they pump into Manchuria to try to turn that into a functioning, portion of Japan, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So,
Good
anyway.
job, guys. Do you agree that the Australian victory at Milne Bay was the first Allied land victory in the Pacific theater? Ricardo from
Nope.
Australia wants to know.
That is interesting because that is a question that is, or an opinion that is often bandied about, I hate to say it, by Australians. But if you look at the actual chronology of land combat, Alligator Creek happens like 10 days before the Battle of Milne Bay does. So I prefer, just for the sake of cohesion between our allies, to say that around the same time. I think both of those battles are both incredibly important in demonstrating that we have that both the Australians and the Americans are now fielding troops that have sufficient cohesion and firepower to stand up to the Japanese. But Alligator Creek happens first.
Cool. Good
Yeah.
job. Is
And
General
I just found those numbers.
Go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead, Parker.
So Japanese civilian deaths, and this is a high-end estimate. You get about 210,000 killed between the two atomic bombings, about 220,000 killed by the bombing attacks against the home islands. You get about 120,000 killed in combat in the Central Pacific, primarily in Okinawa. That's where the bulk of the civilians are going to die in the Pacific. Although there's a fairly large number that are killed in the Philippines as well, and of course Saipan and Tinian.
Sure.
And then 250,000 are killed by the Soviets in the invasion of Manchuria. So yeah, the Soviets are about a third, a little less than a third of the total civilian body count, and that all happens in the last in a month, and then the subsequent imprisonment of those people. Yeah,
Incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, great info. Is General Millard Harmon an under-recognized contributor to the defeat of Japanese forces in SOPAC? Jerry W. from St. Cloud, Florida.
That's
Yeah,
all you,
probably
John.
so. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a solid aerial commander. He's a solid logistical commander. I don't know that we'll ever know what his full potential would have been because
Give,
what is it in 1943 at some point?
give me the scoop on
Um,
him because I'm unfamiliar. So elaborate on his role.
Millard Harmon was an Army Air Forces general who's operating in the South Pacific area, like Halsey's Ballywhack, and he's really kind of the coordinator who is making something of the Guadalcanal combat happen
Okay.
and making it possible. So he's I think his strength, I've always thought, is in inter-service coordination. He's more or less respected by most who come into contact with him. He's lost in an airplane crash, I think at sea, and they searched and searched and searched for him and any other survivors, and they never found a trace of them, as I understand it.
Is he the guy that takes over after Geiger?
No, that's Woods.
No,
Oh, okay. Sorry.
All right.
On the island you're talking about, on Guadalcanal?
Yeah, that's what I was.
No,
Yeah.
that's Woods. It's Lewis Woods.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello. What can be talked about with regards to sniper use in the Pacific? I know they had a real impact at Henderson Field. Thanks. Bob L. would like to know.
Every infantry unit, from Marine Corps to Army had dedicated sharpshooters. Now, if you're talking about like traditional scout sniper teams, there were a handful on Guadalcanal for the Marines. You see the real first major implementation of those guys on Tarawa, led by the guy that we talked about a couple weeks ago, John, William Dean Hawkins, who led those scout snipers on base show. He was the guy that ran them up the pier. There's a lot of footage of those guys, a lot of pictures of those guys doing their work with the big old massive 8-power Unerdal scopes on their O3s. But every unit had a dedicated sharpshooter per se, whether or not they had a scope on their rifle or not. I don't think that necessarily means that whether or not they're a sniper. I don't think that classifies them per se.
Anybody else?
Not me.
nothing to add. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Larry G. from Bear Valley, California wants to know if Tokyo Rose, what kind of effect did she have on soldiers' morale?
That's a great question.
That is.
Yeah.
That is, and I think we all can have an opinion on that one because throughout the war, it became abundantly clear, even early in the war, that it was pure earlier in the war, it was pure propaganda. And for the most part, especially guys on submarines, United States Navy submarines, they listened to a lot of that jazz. And she would even pinpoint, not
Yeah.
pinpoint the location, but she would say, USS Wahoo, we know you're on patrol, and it would kind of freak those guys out. Like, how the hell did she know? But
Yeah.
after a while, it became comical because some of the things that she would say were so off the reservation that it was goofy, and they found it to be humorous. And most guys would listen. And I remember guys telling me this all the time. They would like, if they had the opportunity, they would seek out the program because she played the best music.
Right.
She played all the hot. How the hell she got them? God knows. But she would play all the hot music of the time that was like hot in Chicago. She'd be playing it out of, you know, whatever
Tokyo.
radio station it was in Tokyo. So God knows how she got it, but she did. And guys would listen to her propaganda, like news, if you will, saying, "Oh, the big bad Imperial fleet's coming to get you," and they thought it was humorous, but they really listened to her for the radio, for the music, and they enjoyed it.
Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. I never had any one veteran tell me that she put any dent in their morale of any
Yeah.
kind at any time. And exactly like what Seth said, they listen for the music and maybe the feminine voice too.
Yeah, yeah, it's
That
true. I
too.
never thought of that, but yeah,
She had a nice
probably right. Yeah,
voice, and I think
she
they
did.
probably enjoyed that. But I don't. I know of no one who said, "Oh man, that was really rough on my mind." The tough thing for morale would be the reality of whatever you're actually facing, the crappy conditions, Japanese infiltrators, combat, all those things that are really more front and center than whatever
Or
she was saying.
or the
I
Dear
knew,
John letter that you just got. Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
I
Right.
knew guys that they'd get pissed off because she would have the newest music. That was the thing that irritated them more than anything. It wasn't that it was like, oh my God, how the hell did she get it and we don't have it? That was the thing that
Yeah.
really irritated them more than anything because they weren't hearing this
Yeah.
anywhere else but from her. And
Right.
it's if you do I think it's on YouTube. There's a few of her original recordings out there, and they're cool. They really are.
Oh, I gotta go check that
They're
out.
neat.
Yeah,
They're
definitely.
Yeah.
really neat. I forget what the
Okay.
official name of the program. We called her Tokyo Rose. That wasn't her name. I mean, and actually there were several of them. They weren't just
Yeah.
what
Right.
was her name? Iva Taguchi. There are actually several ladies who did it, but the Zero Hour. That was the name of the program. The Zero Hour.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's out there. It's cool.
I want to
It's
say
neat.
they were. I read like one or two of them were thrown in prison after the war for a little
Yeah.
bit.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah. So
nothing
what was her
too
name?
crazy.
Taguri, or she was a UCLA
Iva.
grad or something, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they tried her for treason. And I
Hmm.
think they did wind up throwing her in jail, but they wound up overturning that and pulling her out or getting her out.
Same thing with Margaret Gillers, I guess. Axis Sally, just
Access
one of
Right.
Sally.
several,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the most infamous.
Yeah.
Cool. Jared from Sacramento, California. Hi, Seth, John, and Sean. Thank you, Jared, for including me. Do you think the 27th Infantry Division redeemed its reputation while fighting on Okinawa?
Ooh.
Toss it to
Let
John
me
McManus. Yes, sir.
Go for it.
let's
Yeah.
queue up in the batter's box here in the wheelhouse. Let me just preface by saying they really didn't have to redeem their reputation because they had nothing to be ashamed of, because they had been incredibly unfairly impugned by my good buddy Holland Smith, and some very unfortunate reporting by an otherwise
Yeah.
incredibly courageous war correspondent, Robert Sherrod,
Yes.
who did some incredibly irresponsible reporting because he had cozied up to Holland Smith, who was sort of just giving out details that were not true. And what I mean by that is the idea that 27th Division soldiers really had cowered in their foxholes,
Right.
had no confidence in their leadership on Saipan. Actually, when you study the battle that he was writing about, the 27th Division fought incredibly valorously, and especially against the last Japanese attack on
Yeah.
Saipan
Oh
in
yeah.
July 1944. I mean, they stacked the bodies. By an actual count, you're talking about 3,000 plus Japanese bodies. You're talking about 3 Medal of Honor recipients, all of them posthumous.
Yes.
So I would argue the 27th Division actually fought pretty well, but like any division, of course, they're not perfect either. Neither are the 2 Marine divisions that are fighting alongside them, and they're pretty darn good divisions. But I think also, too, I agree that the 27th fought well on Okinawa, like pretty much every other division did. But it's kind of interesting because, the 27th probably didn't have as big a role on Okinawa than it might have otherwise. I mean, it was sort of a reserve force that was thrown in the maw here and there, while other units like the 77th Division, the 1st and 6th Marine Division, and the 7th Infantry Division were taking more of the lead more often. So
Some of
maybe there
that
was a
is,
residue.
now I was just going to say that some of that is due to the fact that 27th had not been fully
They weren't at full strength,
reconstituted.
right?
Yeah, right. The
Right.
other three army divisions there are beefed up, and 27th ID is not. I traveled with a guest whose dad had been in 27 ID, and I went with her to Saipan, and she talked about the emotional toll that Sherrod's articles had on the soldiers in that division. That they felt
Betrayed.
ashamed, yeah, betrayed, and angry, and really hurt emotionally. It was just like, man, how could you do that to us? Particularly, yeah, as you say, in the face of that final Banzai attack, one of their battalions just gets absolutely overrun. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And go ahead. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
No, yeah, that it's so. Yeah, that was really uncalled for by Robert Sherrod, and you're right. Otherwise he was a very competent reporter, but yeah, in this case he really bollocksed it.
The
He
the the
did.
Gilkasai on Saipan, this is what we're dancing
Yep.
around here. And you know, again, you can lay the blame at the foot of United States Marine Corps officers, i.e., Holland Smith, who had been told before it ever occurred by 27th ID and by some of his Marines saying, hey, there's a lot of Japanese up here.
Moving
Things
around.
are probably going to happen. We
Yeah.
hear a lot of people, we hear, there's all kind of indicators that the defecation is going to hit the ventilation and it's going to hit these guys in the face. And even after it occurs, and it's what, hours after the Japanese launched this attack, and they're still fighting, and Holland Smith's like, wow, that's nothing going on. He's
Yeah.
so clueless as to the reality of life that he never understood what was going on. So you can actually pin the blame for that on him as well. And I always point out, because my wife is a dentist, that one of those Medal of Honor recipients, Benjamin Solomon, was a dentist, by the way. So
Dentist.
yay,
That's right.
DDS, go for it.
And
Yeah.
great point, Seth. And Ben Salomon was a true certified badass.
Oh my
I
God,
invite
yeah.
everybody to take a look at what he did. So this is a guy who was a dentist, like you said, but also was just passionate about being an infantryman too. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when he would get done with his duties, he would go train with the infantry, and like that's how he had originally joined the army.
In
And
particular, machine guns.
exactly. He loved machine guns, and of
Yeah, he
course that
did.
plays into what happens here. So then, of course, there being casualties during the Battle of Saipan. A battalion surgeon is hit and can't continue, and so Salomon becomes basically a battalion surgeon. And he was saying that he was going to train to be a physician after the war too, as if the rest of this isn't enough. And then, of course, Seth, you mentioned how one of the battalions, this is one from the 105th Infantry, gets hit really hard. That's the one that Solomon is in, and so he's got his aid station, and he tells his guys, "Get the patients and evacuate them. I'll hold them off." And he gets on a machine gun, and there were later literally dozens of Japanese bodies around him, and there
Yeah.
were, I think, something in the order of about 70 plus wounds that he had on his body, and
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
slumped over his gun. So it's yeah, I mean, Holland Smith's role in this is just so central. Because also he never is near any of the fighting. He's at his
Right.
command post. That's as far forward as he ever gets.
Yeah.
And yet he's kind of sabotaging the maw. And to speak to John's point about, it's really interesting what you said about a daughter of one of the veterans. So I
Mhm.
found a lot of that correspondence that the guys wrote at the time back home and elsewhere, and it's often to their Congress people, because they were so blindsided by that story, so
Yeah.
devastated, because of course they already knew that Holland Smith had fired their quite well liked and beloved division commander Ralph Smith. That was upsetting to them, of course, but not really as much as that article. And so this
Yeah.
was really painful for the families too. Imagine if you're a Gold Star family from the 27th ID, you see that article and you're like, oh my God, my son got killed because of incompetence. And remember, this is a New York National Guard unit. So they're kind of wired in politically in a very big state. And so there are some pretty heavy-hitting politicians now who are on the side of the 27th and wanting to investigate this. It just leads to such a terrible kind of self-defeating argument in political circles, in media, and to the credit of Ernie King and George Marshall, both of them realized this isn't good to have the
Yeah.
services at
Yeah.
one another's throats. Let's calm this down. And I think that was exactly right. And of course, fortunately, they never let Holland Smith command troops in combat again. And the Army said that we won't serve under him. I don't blame them.
Right.
He was the central figure in all this, just in my opinion.
No,
Yeah.
don't
I
think
mean,
I
and
don't
the
think
way to
there's an
solve
argument
that
there.
is, yeah, you kick Holland Smith upstairs into basically a ceremonial role, and you just get him out of the way. And Nimitz has his part in that too. Everybody recognizes that, the U.S. Army is out here. They've got 1.7 million combat troops. They are also taking care of all of the logistical support for the Marine Corps. And if we've got this guy who cannot play nice with the Army at this point in the war, he can't.
Get rid of him.
Yeah, get rid of him. We
He's not
got
worth
other
it.
things. Right.
Well, what purpose did he serve? Honestly, even
Yeah.
before I mean, seriously, even before the
Well, I mean,
debacle, with the Smith versus Smith thing, what did
yeah,
Holland Smith actually do previous? Answer is nothing. We talked about Tarawa and that whole
yeah,
mess.
And
keeping,
Macon.
yeah, right.
Yeah, well, not even just Macon, but keeping one whole regiment from Julian Smith as they're taking Tarawa, and they're hitting
Mhm.
Tarawa at a 1.6 to 1 ratio, and Holland Smith would not release that because he had this
Regiment.
core reserve.
Yeah,
The regiment, yeah, it was asinine.
yeah,
He was a clown.
This guy. The problem with the guy is he wanted to act like he's the big, gruff, tough, combat savvy Marine, and he hadn't earned that title.
right.
He'd never really seen any action. He'd gotten his commission through connections rather than the Naval Academy or OCS, where you really do earn your commission.
Yeah,
He knew something about amphibious warfare. If
He
they
did.
put him in a training command the whole war, he would have been useful. Where he was, he's like throwing a bomb right at
yeah,
the feet of everybody because he's so dense, he's so close-minded, and obviously so full of hatred for the other services, not just the Army, but the Navy too.
don't like the
Yeah,
Navy either. Yeah,
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 doesn't like
very
anybody who's
much
not a
so.
Marine, and
yeah,
because he thinks he's the ultimate Mr. Marine. And you remember he would just say, "Oh, all I want to do is kill Japanese." And now he didn't say it as nicely as I just did. He's like
right.
gruff, tough guy. Give me a rifle and I'll kill him. He's like all this bravado. Well, where was he when he had the opportunity to be at the front lines on Saipan and know
Yeah,
what was really going on? All of a sudden, he wasn't as tough then. So it's very hard to really muster a whole lot of respect for somebody like that, considering the damage he did.
yeah.
100%.
Rangers and Dental Corps lead the way, is what I'm hearing from you guys, right?
Dental Corps. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, for
yeah. We
sure.
beat that one to death. All right.
Sorry.
On that Tarawa
There's a lot
note,
to say though.
on the Tarawa
There is.
note, wasn't the anniversary Tarawa this week?
Yes.
So,
Mhm.
Zell from Birmingham, Alabama wants to know, thank you again for what you do. I thoroughly enjoy waking up on Tuesdays to watch your latest conversations. It's commonly agreed that Peleliu was unnecessary. Was Tarawa also unnecessary? Would it have been better to bypass and let them die on the vine like so many other islands, or were the lessons learned worth the sacrifice?
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah, I tend to say guardedly yes. Go,
Yes.
Seth.
So, point number one, could we have bypassed Tarawa? The short answer to that is no, because we needed the next step in the line was the Marshall Islands. And we viewed Batio and that whole area around the Gilberts as a potential threat to any advance further in that direction. So, just like any other area, i.e., the Philippines, granted, the Philippines is a significantly larger area to the Japanese in 41, they wanted to eliminate the possibility of that dagger. Same thing for Batio. And was the cost worth the lessons we learned? Abso-friggin-lutely. The
Yeah.
things that, I mean, God bless every Marine and sailor who was killed on that island, but The UDTs come about because of Tarawa. The pre-invasion bombardments improve, and the method in which we do that improves because of Tarawa. There are different infantry tactics that are improved because of Tarawa. There are more tanks that are involved in actions because of Tarawa. The LVTs,
Yes.
admittedly, of which there were a limited amount in November 1943, realized that the Marine Corps and the Army realized these are really good, and we're going to have to cross more reefs in the future. So we need these by the truckload and
Right.
trainload, and they come pumping these things out. And that's why you see, obviously, you see LCVPs throughout the war, but the LVT is the main vehicle that brings people to shore from then on. And there's countless other lessons that were learned because of the sacrifices at Batio. And I said this when John, when you and I did our archival thing on Batio, it informs everything that happens after it.
Yeah.
Everything, everything, good and bad.
Yeah, I'd like to think that, if you were to fast forward to 1944, middle to end of 44, if we'd had to go up against that island with the type of defenses that it had in at the end of 43, if Close and Connolly had done the
Yeah.
bombardment against that thing and we had gone in with, 100% Amtraks and whatnot, and the proper application of force, a 3-to-1 ratio of force on the beach rather than 1.6-to-1, i.e., we're going to put a full division into this thing right off the bat. I think we would have mopped the floor with that garrison there.
There would have been heavy casualties, I
It would
think.
it would have been a stiff fight, but it would not
Yeah.
have been nearly as bloody, I don't think,
I,
as it
I,
was.
I would agree with that to a degree. But I mean, Admiral Nimitz himself, after the fact, when they because there was a lot of controversy over the casualties because of Operation Galvanic,
For sure.
specifically Tarawa, and Nimitz himself, I don't remember when, but Nimitz himself said there had to be a Tarawa. There
Yeah.
had to be, not for the bloodletting, but for the lessons that were learned,
Right.
what you need to do and what you don't need to do. You got to learn it somewhere. And combat is a vicious, brutal school, but it where else are you going to learn it? Where
Yeah.
you would have learned it at Kwajalein, if you didn't learn it at Batio.
Well,
Mhm.
and plus, let's say you are going on to the Marshalls, you're probably going to have to deal with Japanese air power coming from Tarawa. And
Which is the reason they
that's,
captured Batio in the first place, was to capture that airfield.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
So,
Hi, Seth and John. My question was what was more impressive? The way the U.S. Navy rolled back the Japanese with overwhelming force later in the war, or the way the Japanese conquered huge swaths of Southeast Asia and in the South and Central Pacific in the first phase of the first half of the war with less preponderance of force. Thanks, Glenn. I just want to say something about that, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong. Was there
First of all,
ever more?
that's a
Was
great
there
question.
was there ever more mileage captured in such a short amount of time in World War II than what the Japanese did in the first 3 or 4 months?
I would say no. Um, yeah, I mean, I look at their opening campaign. I think it's absolutely brilliant, but that also has to be leavened by the knowledge that they are. I don't want to say that they're punching into air because there are 370,000 Allied troops in that region of the world, but they're uncoordinated. There's no, we don't have the structure for running multinational forces and that kind of thing. That's just not a thing at that point in the war. The ABDA command is really our first sort of attempt to create that kind of a framework. But yeah, I think you have to give the Japanese real kudos for having gauged the opposition very accurately and putting together rapidly this incredibly complex plan of campaign that ends up overrunning one of the largest empires in the history of mankind, and they do it with about 11 divisions. It's a pretty stunning display overall. On the other hand, the late war stuff that we are capable of doing is just a
it's a
totally
different
different animal.
animal.
different animal and is
Godzilla.
really impressive in its own right. So I don't know. Where do you come down on that?
So I come down on the late war stuff. I'll use a college football analogy. Sometimes you get to like early October in a college football season and you turn around and there's an undefeated team, but they haven't played anybody.
Right,
And then later when they play somebody, it's a completely different season. I think
right.
that's what happens for the Japanese. They really hadn't played anybody by the summer of 1942. And when they started to, we have Coral Sea, we have Midway, we have Guadalcanal. They're starting to now run into a peer operator. And yes, they capture about a lot of territory, I guess more than the Germans did in the Soviet Union, because that's the only other thing I could think of that could compare with
Large
it.
number of people too.
And they do, but they really control these areas? They don't. The Philippines, even though they win that first campaign,
Right.
in the sense of negating Allied military power for the moment. It all has a kind of Germans Yugoslavia kind of feel to it. It's like, okay, they've overrun a lot of this territory. Are they really in control of it? What are they doing with it? And is this going to lead to a kind of strategic asset for them? Sometimes yes, maybe like the North Burma campaign, maybe.
Yeah, because
But
I was going to push back and I'm going to say, yeah, they played the British and they crushed the
Really,
British. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
138,000 casualties. They played the British and
yeah.
they just
but
absolutely
that's
waxed them.
And that's
Um,
most of British power is a portion elsewhere on the globe. The British are trying to use these colonial forces, and we now see the weaknesses for the British there. I
yeah,
mean, it's,
although there were
I mean,
Australians there too, I would
And
say.
Gurkhas are pretty good fighters too.
oh,
Yeah,
there's no question about
They're
that.
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. They're amazing. Um,
And
I,
to
you
me,
know,
that's one of the interesting things about 1942 is just like how come those tactics that worked so incredibly well in places like Malaya and Burma just fall on their faces in places like Guadalcanal and New Guinea?
I think
And
that
there's a lot
well,
the
that
I think
goes
that's
into that.
why.
Yeah,
yeah, I think the
I think
answer is
that's why.
pretty. Go ahead, John.
And I think what the United States and its allies, but especially the United States, are able to do by 1944 and 45 is create an economic and war machine, the likes of which the planet has never really seen,
yeah,
especially in terms of naval power, but also, as I've chronicled many times, the ground power that goes with it, the air power, but also the technological power, the logistical heft. The Japanese just don't, they're not going to be able to play in that game. I mean, they
yeah,
they they just aren't. So I think one of the reasons why they do so well, I think John, really pinpointed it. They've really calculated the weaknesses of their enemies and have estimated them very well at the beginning and planned to some extent some pretty high speed operations, especially in Malaya, of course,
yeah.
in North Burma, but again, there's a kind of temporary feel to it that if I'm forced to choose between the two, I think it's more impressive what the U.S. and its allies are able to do. Just my opinion.
Mhm.
I would agree with that 100%. When you look at the force that is at sea and on land, and let's just say October 1944, that is a force. And I'm not just talking the U.S. Navy, although that's a big part of it. I mean, just look at the armies, plural, that are in the Philippines alone. And then then
The
you
air
have
power
two.
that's being built up in the Marianas as well. Yeah,
Right, and the air
yeah,
power that's in the Philippines too, I mean, or will be in the Philippines soon. I
Mhm.
mean, you have and that's not even counting the Seventh Fleet and the Fifth Fleet or the Third Fleet when all, the whole thing. I mean, you have an incredibly, tremendously powerful force of American arms in just that one portion of the globe that I don't think anybody could touch at that point. And compared with that, your force of 1944 with 1942, the Japanese offensive force, put
yeah.
those
It's
two
night and
forces
day.
together,
Yeah,
U.S. is going to stomp them like a bug.
But I don't
Especially in
think
terms of amphibious capability.
the question
And
is
naval power.
whether the 44, 45 could beat the 42. I
Yeah,
think
that's
no, I know.
that,
I'm making the comparison that if
yeah.
you look at what's more impressive, I mean, yeah, the Japanese grab a lot of land and they grab a lot of people and they do it fast and they stun the world. But, the power of the force that comes out in 43, really late 43, early 44, onto the end of 44, it's world beating.
yeah.
Nobody can touch that.
I think we all agree. just to kind of go on the other side, I mean, the Japanese are beating American divisions. They are beating British divisions. They are
Mm,
taking, and they're
They're not
taking.
really beating American
they're
divisions.
not beating American
Not
divisions.
tactically, the logistically in the Philippines for sure.
Yeah, they're
But
beating
there's only,
Filipino
you know, it's
divisions.
only the Philippine division that
Right.
you could say is an American division.
Right.
Once they come toe to toe against American ground combat divisions in this war, they really never win again. And so if we're talking about ground
Yeah.
warfare, of course you got Savo Island. I mean, in terms of
Yeah.
ship
Yeah.
engagements, of course, but
The problem for the Japanese is they were not able to translate their early war operational victories into strategic victory at the diplomatic table. That those victories were not sufficiently shocking to the American people, particularly because of the way that they opened the war at Pearl Harbor. You've essentially kicked over your own diplomatic table at that point and guaranteed for yourself that there's not going to be a diplomatic solution to this war. Oops.
I think John McManus, you put it perfectly when we did the army at Pearl Harbor, and you said now the Japanese have a lot of pissed off people on their hands.
they really do. And
Yeah.
that
You pissed
lasted for
off an
years.
entire nation, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's true.
That was a great question. That was by Glenn R. Glenn, that was a
Great question, Glenn R.
Yeah, definitely.
Want to give him props on that.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Love the show. Please keep it up. Question. Many Pacific War historians argue Allied victory over Japan was inevitable because of superior production, equipment, and logistics. In your humble opinion, what made victory not inevitable? This is from Ed in Santa Cruz, California.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. So, I am not an economic determinist, and this is okay. So this takes me all the way back to when I first read Paul Kennedy's The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, and he makes a very persuasive argument that when the U.S. and the Soviet Union gets into the war, that's basically it. That in the battle of the swordsmiths, if you will, the Allies are very clearly winning. So I was kind of in that camp for a number of years until Richard Overy came out with his Why the Allies Won, which really kind of changed how I thought. That I think Overy did a brilliant job of acknowledging that economics was incredibly important to the war, but there were so many other dimensions to the war. There were social dimensions, there were scientific dimensions, there were political leadership dimensions, and that the war's outcome was not predetermined. And I buy that at a big picture level. However, within the more limited context of the Pacific Campaign, I would argue that as long as the U.S. maintains the political will to stay in the war, the disparity of economic forces strictly between America and Japan is so disparate that I think at the end of the day, the Americans are going to win almost inevitably unless they get downcast somehow, and decide to kind of throw in the towel. And the window for that happening is it's in 1942 somewhere. And unfortunately, the Japanese, again, kind of make their own bed by the way they attack Pearl Harbor. So I find it very difficult to think of any way that the Japanese are going to get out of eventually being defeated by the U.S. I'm open to opinions on that.
So I am a sort of relentless opponent of the inevitability thesis that really was predominant, I think, for a while, like around the Paul Kennedy time
Yeah.
and others who would just say, "Oh, well, it's just the Allied coalition, it's over. Their victory is inevitable." So I'm attacking this from a number of different angles. As a military historian, I'm looking at the broad sweep of human military history. And I will tell you that the side with more stuff, more economics, more technology,
Not.
more better military, doesn't always win. We are
Yes.
painfully aware of that in the United States, of course.
Yep.
But also, it's our founding reality when we defeat the greatest military power on the planet,
Fair.
not really tactically on the battlefield, but in other ways that are more, material and important.
Yeah.
So we have that. We also have I think John's point about the political will is the central point. As
That's the
long
point.
as that, because wars are decided by human will ultimately, and that manifests in a lot of different ways. So economically, that means sacrifice on the home front to mobilize in such a way that you are going to be able to defeat Japan. And remember, we're fighting a global war in a way that no one else
Yes.
has before or since, and no one really is in World War II, excepting Britain, Australia, Canada, but not to the same level. So
I
how long will the American public be on board with that? And how many
Hmm.
casualties will there be? How much sacrifice at home?
Yep.
And so now also the other dimension to it that I tend to look at that won't surprise you guys is at the spear point of combat. How many times are we going to be able to have people who are going to be trained up and willing to fight a battle like Tarawa, or
Mm.
Saipan, or Guam, or Iwo freaking Jima, or Okinawa, or Luzon, or Leyte? I mean, add it up, that is no sure thing.
Right.
And even if we can put people in uniform and send them over there, I mean, how many real fighters are we going to have going forward? And so I think that I think it's say by the end of 42 and into 43, there's no question that Japan is not going to get out of this war what it would have hoped to have in the war in terms of a big victory. I
Right.
do think it's very possible, even as of the spring of 1945 in the summer, that they can salvage something
Hmm.
short of being completely conquered and occupied and whatever.
Yes,
So they had,
I
yeah, I
agree
mean,
with that.
you guys know they had entered this war thinking Yamato Damashi is going to be decisive, the fighting spirit. But what happens if you encounter an enemy that has the same fighting spirit, but also all this other stuff? That's a difference maker, and that is the essence of World War II, but it was not inevitable in my view.
Yeah.
I think the point that both of you hit on insofar as the political will within the United States is tremendous, and the will of the people to
People,
continue the fight.
the national
There's
will.
a reason, and I love him to death. There's a reason that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did the things that he did during the war. He let out the pictures of American soldiers dead in Bunagona. He let out the pictures and footage of Marines dead on Bashios Beach to remind the American public, who by November 1943 were sick and tired of rationing. I say this all the
Yeah.
time. They were worried about where their turkey was coming from,
Right.
as opposed to what their sons were doing over, or brothers or whoever were doing overseas. That's why he did what he did throughout the war, to say, guess what? You're comfortable in your house, but there are American boys who are getting killed. And
Right.
you need to remember this. You need to get off your sorry ass and go to work. You need to quit your complaining and just sacrifice for a little while, because these guys are sacrificing a hell of a lot more than you are.
Yeah.
And they're, yeah, of course they're complaining. They're soldiers, they're Marines. That's what they do. But they're doing it for the greater good. So shut up, suck it up, and just carry on.
Yeah.
And he was masterful at that. And if you look at the American, you look at the Gallup polls, and you look at the ebb and flow of American home front morale, the low points of American morale, and by that I mean the low points in which everybody was sick and tired of the war. All of a sudden, there's a war bond drive. All of a
Hmm.
sudden, pictures are
Hmm.
released. All of a sudden, documentaries are released, with the Marines
Yeah.
at Tarawa and different things like that. That's done very, very strategically
Yeah.
by the Roosevelt administration, not just him, but the Roosevelt administration, because they could read the tea leaves. They could see, people are starting to wane. Let's throw some blood at them and make them really pissed off. And it worked. It
Right.
worked. And
Which it,
insofar, um,
and I was there's a piece of irony there too, in that honestly, I hate to say it, but the sacrifices by the American home front are trivial,
negligible. There's nothing.
negligible
Yeah,
in compare.
trivial is a
I
better
mean,
better word. It's
you know,
nothing.
you look
Compared to
you
the
look at what
Soviet
the
home front.
Soviet people are going
Yeah.
through and the Chinese people are
Even the
going through,
British.
Yeah.
even the British. Oh
Yeah,
Yep.
my
those people
God.
had hardly
Oh,
The
anything.
you can't
Germans.
get new
Yeah.
tires for your car. Oh, cry me a
Yeah.
river.
Boo hoo. I don't have a B
Boo-hoo.
ticket or an A ticket for
Yeah,
my
I can't.
car. Suck it
Yeah,
up.
suck it up. Anyway,
Ride the
Well, and the
bus.
but that said, I mean, that was also real. I mean,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
yeah, I guess I would say that our most dangerous moment, I think you're right, actually comes towards the end of the war. That there
Mhm.
was a possibility there that we were just going to say, I don't want to invade Japan. I don't want to put boots on the ground.
Seventh War
Screw it.
Loan. Why do they
Yeah,
put those flag raisers, send them across the country to Soldier Field and all places like that? There's a reason for that, because people are
because
sick and
Exactly.
tired of this crap.
right.
And the
Exactly.
Seventh War
And
Loan was one of the
you know,
most, if not the most successful war loan of the entire war.
and it
Yeah,
was so necessary and imperative. And then the other thing to guys is that the evidence of everything we're saying, the minute the war ends, we are gutting our armed forces, demobilizing them, bring the boys home. There's all that political pressure. There are soldier demonstrations, and
right.
within 2 years, we're almost back to where we were in 1939. I'm exaggerating,
Yeah,
but we're not in a very good position in
right.
terms of our military capability. So the American public were just ready to be done with this, and
Yes.
that
Yep.
that is a sort of point of vulnerability as a just potentially, I guess.
So to package this all together,
Great question, by the way.
Oh
we
yeah,
we,
awesome
we could
question.
say that basically the American will to keep fighting is the wild card, the only wild card that could have actually derailed this whole thing.
I think that's right.
Yeah,
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 and not just the American, but maybe the British as
sure.
well, and the
Right.
Soviets and the Chinese, and yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And let me broaden it in terms of larger military history. Same thing with the North in the Civil War. It's
Right.
almost the same kind of dynamic too. It
Mhm.
is not inevitable, and as of 64, it still could have gone a different way. Well, so too in 1944 and 45, even though we're
Mhm.
clearly winning, still, is that
Are we going to,
enough?
yeah, are we going to get the political goals that we have set out in 1943, unconditional surrender? And arguably, we kind of didn't. We got unconditional surrender with an asterisk. So,
We did, which was to the interest of everybody, fortunately.
absolutely. I'm not saying it was a bad
Yeah.
call. It just, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
yeah.
It sounds like out of the six major powers, five of them have mass civilian bombings. And one doesn't, and we're the ones complaining the most about the war.
Exactly.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that we're the ones complaining the most about the war. By
I know, I'm
1945,
just
everybody was sick of the war. But the thing
Boy.
is that I always point out is that, and I can't wait to dig into this when we do the home front to a degree. Not We're not doing a home front podcast, but a few episodes on it, is that the whole flag waving uh, image that we have in our mind post Pearl Harbor, that lasted about 2 months.
Right.
It
Right.
really did. It
Yeah.
lasted
Yeah.
about 2 months, and
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Great, okay, I'll take the old Glory and put her back in the garage, and where's my hamburger?"
Right.
Seriously,
Right.
because I don't care what anybody says, it's the God's honest truth. Americans are a spoiled people. We are. We are, dude.
Yeah.
We are, and we always have been. Well, I wouldn't say we always have been. From the 20th century on,
Yeah. In the
we
modern
have been a
period,
very spoiled
definitely.
people.
Yeah.
All
Most
right.
definitely.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Keep
All
next.
going
right.
to the mall. Keep shopping. We're at
Heck
war.
yeah.
Keep going. It's
It's
Good for the
okay.
economy.
Pretty
exactly
much,
that's a
man.
great
Remember
point,
that one?
Sean.
Everybody
Yeah.
remembers that
Yep.
one? I
Yeah.
remember
Yep.
that one.
I'll
Yeah.
bet you do.
Keep shopping.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
I recently listened to a podcast on the Battle of Okinawa, especially from the attack on Hacksaw Ridge forward. The descriptive sequence appeared to suggest that the flamethrower tanks were not made use of until well into the attack after many casualties. Why was this case, especially given the lessons learned at Iwo Jima? Jeff B wants to know.
Well, okay. I think I may be. John, have you been to Okinawa? Have you been to
Mm.
Hacksaw? Okay, so I may be the only dude that's actually walked around on the top of Hacksaw. You can't get a flamethrower tank up there. It's a sheer cliff. It's incredibly steep terrain. So, and the other thing is, it's also incredibly small. If you've seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge, it makes it look like the top of that freaking ridge is the size of an NFL stadium. It's the size of a croquet pitch. We measured it on one of our episodes. It's like 120 feet across the top of that damn thing, maybe 200. I don't know. It's super super tiny,
About the
which
size of my
means
backyard.
yeah, it's
Seriously.
it's nothing. Which means that the top of that ridge honestly was more of a no man's land than anything else. That you had the Japanese on the north side of that, ridge in the reverse slope, and we were kind of coming up the cliff on the south side of that, or excuse me, other way around. We were coming up the north side of that thing. They're on the south side. So for a guy like Desmond Doss to be, dragging casualties off the top of that thing, I mean, he's practically eyeball to eyeball with, any of the Japanese that are there. It's crazy when you walk around on the top of it. But the material point remains that just in terms of the terrain, you just can't get a tank up there. It's just not going to happen unless you come up the west side of that ridge. That's how we bring buses up it now to get to the top to drop our guests off. But Okinawa is really rugged, and there are just places the tanks just can't get to. And so I would not look at the failure to use armor on that particular piece of terrain as a failure to learn so much as a failure to, there's no way to magically teleport them things up to the top of that ridge.
Yeah, and I would add that if it's there and it's possible to use, AD Bruce is going to use it. I would guarantee that. And
Yeah.
and there are 51 flame tanks that we have operational at any given time, and that's for the whole line. That's for all of 10th Army on Okinawa. So that's a lot of different missions we've got, and they're best kind of dealing with caves. I mean, that's what they're really the best at. And maybe like advanced ridge lines, slopes, things like that. But yeah, I mean, the escarpment is not the Hacksaw Ridge is not the place for them,
Yeah.
to build on John's point. But there just aren't that many of them either, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, it's funny when you're standing on the top of Hacksaw and you're looking north, you can look right down on Kakuzu Ridge.
Mm.
And the bowl there, or the valley between those two terrain features, is the site of the biggest single day loss of armor in that entire campaign.
Mm.
That I think this is 27th ID tries to run basically their attached battalion of Shermans. They run them in the gulf between there's Kakuzu. Okay, so I'm standing on Hacksaw, I'm looking to the north. Kakuzu is over here kind of to my left. There's a little bit of a saddle and there's another hill that's kind of off to my right. They brought this whole group of armor through that saddle and tried to sweep in behind Kakuzu Ridge to knock out Kakuzu Village, which is sitting right down there. And there were 47 millimeter anti-tank guns that were emplaced along the base of Hacksaw Ridge and just shoot that attack to pieces. They lose something like 22 of the 34 attacking tanks or something like that in the course of an afternoon. So, yeah, Okinawa is a very dangerous environment for our armor. Even, late war up armored Shermans that we were using, 47 millimeter anti-tank guns that the Japanese are using in a lot of anti-tank mines and that kind of stuff makes this a very dangerous place.
Yep. And the suicide attack anti-tank teams
Yes,
too
sir.
that are coming out of caves.
Yep.
But it's and it amazingly they kill only the smallest percentage of the tanks that are lost. It's the 47 millimeter guns that are the most dangerous adversaries, statistically speaking.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks on that, so to
All
speak.
right. Mark from Louisville, Kentucky. Spent some years in Louisville when I was at Fort Knox. Good bourbon. Can you tell me why the Marine Raiders were disbanded in 1944-ish? I've heard several theories about this, but wondering your perspective. My grandfather was a Marine Raider in the 3rd, wounded at Bougainville, etc. Thank you. Look forward to each week's podcast.
They weren't needed. Simple as that. I mean, they were not needed by 1944. The last major action for the Raiders was the 4th Raider Battalion at Bairoko Harbor, and that was not the last, but that was the last major action. And after that, they were pretty much disbanded and they were thrown into the infantry divisions, the regular Marine Corps divisions. So you see a lot of Raiders in 6th Division. You see a ton of former Raiders in 5th Marine Division, tons of them, but they weren't needed anymore. They were specialized. I don't want to say specialized troops, but I mean, technically they were. And when they were first formed in 1941-42, and the missions in which they were designed to execute were no longer necessary with the world-beating force that we just talked about
Or
10 minutes ago or
feasible
whatever.
for that matter. I mean, I don't
Well, it
think
wasn't necessary.
yeah.
There wasn't any reason to have them if you didn't need them for the purpose in which they were created.
Plus,
And
I
you
don't
have
think a
these,
lot of the Japanese garrisons that were out there were the necessarily you plunk down a battalion of raiders on these places. If you'd send a battalion of raiders to a place like Bescio, they all die.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there weren't a
No.
lot of, flimsily defended Japanese outposts anymore. I would say that were applicable to those kinds of raids. Am I wrong?
No, and I mean that's what I'm saying. That's my overall point is that they weren't needed for the roles in
Okay.
which they were created anymore. And so there was no need to have them any longer.
Right.
There was no need for this quick strike raiding party, i.e., make an island. And
Yeah.
it wasn't, they were just, they weren't needed. They
Superfluous.
needed trigger pullers in the infantry divisions, and these guys were put there. So, and that's why you see, like I said, 5th Marine Division, 6th Division,
A lot of cadre.
45, tons of cadre are
Hmm.
paramarines, former
Right.
Raiders, what have you. I mean, Ira
Yeah.
Hayes was a paramarine for crying out loud. But a couple of the flag raisers actually were former Raiders. I can't remember which ones, but there were a couple of them were former Raiders that were put in these divisions after the battalions were broken up because they weren't needed.
Didn't
And
know
wasn't
that.
there also a lot of dislike and resentment among the conventional forces for the Marine Raiders just in their existence? Wasn't there tension in that respect too, institutionally?
I don't know. I know in 42, when they get to Guadalcanal, the first Raider Battalion, they were shoulder to shoulder with the first division and parts of the second division, so they didn't, those guys didn't care. But when the
Mm.
second Raider Battalion gets to Guadalcanal, they've got all the hot stuff. They got all the hot gear. They got Garands. They've got all the like hot material. And they had that before they ever got to Guadalcanal. And a lot of those guys were resentful to that. And in between first and second battalion, first Raider Battalion, second Raider Battalion, there was a little bit of bad blood, shall we say, between those two guys because they were trying to pilfer the same stuff.
Oh,
You know what I mean? And one got it and the other one didn't. And it was kind of it did create a little bad blood there.
huh.
But as far
Never
as
knew
the other
that.
units, the other Marines, whether I don't know. I don't think so.
Always learning.
Always
Never knew that.
learning.
Yeah.
That's
Always learning.
Yeah, always learning.
Yeah. First Marine Raider Battalion, Edson's Raiders were just, I mean, they were the baddest of the bad. They really were. Those guys were hard. They were harder than woodpecker lips. Those guys were just incredibly awesome. Second Raider Battalion were good too, but they had leadership problems, in my opinion, with Carlson. I thought,
But those experiences with those small unit tactics that was able to be moved into divisions, I mean, that's lessons that are given to those newer
for
units.
sure, those guys are cadre. That's what I'm saying. Like those guys that are in 5th Division, those guys that are in 6th Division that are, 3 stripers or higher
Right.
that were combat veterans from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th Raid Battalion. Yeah, those are your cadre. Those are the guys. That's when 5th Division lands on Ewo. Yes, it's a new division,
But those
but
are
it's
badass.
so replete with combat veterans. How can you call that unit new? Because,
Mhm.
hell, probably 2/3 of those dudes had seen had at least heard one shot fired in anger at some point in their lives,
Sure.
combat careers rather. And I mean, those guys are just bad to the bone.
Yeah.
John Vassalone.
It is
Yeah.
well known
Yeah.
fact that the IJN and IJA had a dysfunctional relationship at best. It's probably less well known fact that the IJA had their own naval assets, primary landing and logistics support ships, but also some offensive platforms. Without making this just into an episode into itself, is this a little bit open-ended? Can you describe just how exactly the IJA and the IJN coordinated naval assets and worked or not worked, as the case may be, together? I've seen very little written that covers IJA naval operations. Joshua from South Georgia.
Joshua from South Georgia. Great question. Next question, please. No, that's a great.
I don't know.
I don't know. No,
Mm.
that's damn.
Yeah.
That is something that honestly needs some scholarly research. And as much as I would say that, yeah, I know a thing or two about the IJN, I can't answer that question. That's a great question. Thank you. Next.
Sorry.
Man.
We're sorry to disappoint
Josh, what we
you.
need you to do is go to the University of Georgia, get a PhD, and write it on IJM Naval Forces in coordination with IJN Navy
Yeah.
Forces.
I mean, I will say that just in general, we we Americans sort of look at ourselves as being, oh, we're the innovators when it comes to amphibious warfare, and we came up with all these, really cool things like
Howard
LSTs.
Smith came up with it all.
Yeah,
Howard
Smith.
Smith,
Yeah.
Howard
Yeah.
Smith came up with all of this. The Japanese did some really innovative stuff. I mean, they arguably had the first example of what we might look at today as a landing ship dock in LSD. They had a purpose-built kind of a merchant cruiser that had a well dock in the back of it that they could put Daihatsu landing craft in and out of that puppy, and they used it during the attack against Shanghai. And I can't remember the name of the ship right off the top of my head. Likewise, the first examples of our landing boats, the LCVP, don't have the
Ramps.
the
That's the
ramp.
LCPLs, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. That we steal that blatantly from the Japanese. They've got, this craft called the Daihatsu, which they use all the time in the early offensives. It's a landing craft that can carry about 100 guys, and it's got a ramp in the front of it. And we get reports back from early uses of this thing again in Shanghai, and that comes back to Higgins, and Higgins is like, "Whoa, that's a good idea." And we end up implementing that in our follow-on versions of that particular craft. So, got to give the Japanese at least some credit for having put some thought into how are we going to land troops? Do we need specialized equipment to do this kind of stuff? We obviously take it to the next level when we do things like, alligators and that sort of thing. But the Japanese were pretty credible amphibious practitioners at the beginning of the war. They did what they lacked was the same sophistication and gunfire support and that sort of thing. And that obligated them to then land mostly on unobserved beaches, if at all possible. They would like to come ashore to, some place where the defenders ain't. But, they could do amphibious operations, and divisions like, the 5th Division in Malaya do very credible amphibious work during the Malayan campaign. So, but again, yeah, I think there's an opportunity there for some scholarly research that is not going to be done by me, but that's a great question.
Good question, man. As an Indonesian, I frequently heard my father and grandfather's stories, and also history lessons of Japanese occupation being far more brutal, despite lasting less than 4 years compared to being a Dutch colony for centuries longer. How did the Japanese manage to have the occupation structure across the Pacific to achieve such efficiency? Perry from Sheffield, UK.
The book you want to read is Greg Duff's, I can't remember the exact name of it. It's like the Japanese occupation of Southeast Asia. And there's very little in the way of scholarly literature on this. God bless it, I'm going to do some real-time history right here. Okay, so I've got my book open right now. Let me get you the name of that. Duff. Oh, come on.
I guess they were holding those all those islands. I mean, what are they holding those with? Like platoons and companies?
Exactly. I mean, it's arguable whether they really can control them, but where they are, they're incredibly repressive. Now, I don't know the specific stats, but isn't Indonesia like somewhere like number 6 or 7, something like that, in terms of people lost in World War II?
It's
So
it's
it's
bad.
it's brutal, absolutely brutal. And that is kind of a microcosm for what's happening elsewhere in Asia and the Pacific. That the Japanese have come ostensibly to supplant white colonizers who are very unpopular in many instances. And so many of the Japanese military personnel think of themselves as liberators. You can understand why, that they're like, okay, we're going to redeem Asians here and liberate them, and we're going to get rid of the white man from our backyard here. And then, of course, they're just a new colonizer and incredibly repressive.
Yeah. I'm sorry, it's Huff. Huff. W.G. Huff, World War II and Southeast Asia, Economy and Society Under Japanese Occupation. It's out by Cambridge University in 2020. And it's really pretty much the only scholarly work on this topic. When the Japanese send 16th Army into Indonesia to occupy it, and this is run by General Imamura Hitoshi, who's going to end up being the commander of 8th Area Army in Rabaul, who's going to be overseeing both the Solomons campaign and the New Guinea campaign. Imamura is a very good general. When he is sent in there, he is explicitly told that your army is going to have to basically fend for itself, that we're not going to be able to supply you logistically with everything you need, and you're going to need to get it from in country. And so right there, that kind of sets up this kind of plunder dynamic for their whole occupation that is going to, inform how they treat the native people there. They come in, they imprison all the Dutch, they look around and they find who are sort of the elite players within Indonesian society. We're going to co-opt them at the point of, a gun and say, you're working with us now and you're going to help, ride herd over the Indonesian population. And of course, they bring in the Kempeitai as well, the secret police. And the result is, yes, this incredibly brutal occupation. Indonesia, along with basically every other economy in Southeast Asia, this is one of the things that Huff talks about in his book, it just implodes because the Japanese, they want things like the oil and the bauxite that are in Indonesia, but they could care less about the people. And since Indonesia had been part of a colonial empire, they were used to getting the majority of their civilian goods from the home country, i.e. the Netherlands, which is now occupied by the Germans, and of course after 42 is completely cut off from the Allies. So you couldn't get anything. You couldn't get nails, you couldn't get needles, you couldn't get, light bulbs, you couldn't get any of that stuff. And so all of the economies in Southeast Asia just go into the toilet, and the result is that they implode by, in many cases, more than 50%. So think about that. We look at a recession here in the States as, oh my God, we've had a down dip of a single-digit percentage or something like that. 50%, I mean, people are starving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that ends up happening is that the Japanese commandeer large groups of workers for railroad projects in Sumatra and Indonesia. We look at, the bridge over the River Kwai, we look at that as sort of the prototypical example of what a Japanese railway project is. And the Burma Railway, which is what that is historically based on, was absolutely horrific. The railroad projects that are going on in Sumatra and Indonesia are, in terms of body count per kilometer of track laid, are far worse than what actually happened on the Burma Railway, which was already horrific.
Wow.
The only reason we don't hear about it is because, frankly, it's all little brown people that are dying there. There were no Allied POWs that were dying on those projects. It's just Indonesians who were dying on those projects. So, yeah, the net result is the economy is going to implode, and at the end of the war, there's a massive famine that happens in eastern Java and also in Bali that's going to kill between, I believe it's 3 or 4 million Indonesians are going to die as a result of that. Oh yeah, it's bad. And there's another famine, a similar famine going on in Tonkin as well.
Right.
So the occupation actually, that's right. It's between 3 and 4 million in Indonesia. I'm just checking this real time, and about 1 and 2 million in Vietnam that are going to die as a result of famine. And all of this is due to the fact that the imperial military is hoarding food and also using the railways and the other food distribution mechanisms, so the civilian population can't get it. It's it's a dumpster fire. It's terrible.
Wow.
So yeah, if you grew up in the war in Indonesia, you absolutely had a terrifying, awful experience.
Wow.
Thank you, Japan.
Yeah. Great answer, John.
Yeah.
That was awesome. This one's a little wordy, but it was so good that I actually
Because we're
included.
not wordy at all.
No,
No, we aren't.
not me, bro.
All right.
Yeah,
Dan
you really have
C.
to
from
pry the
San
words out of
Antonio,
us.
Texas. We're going to talk about New Guinea. And I remember when Seth was prepping for the New Guinea campaign, did a really good job with that. But I love what he did here. So just bear with this question. Hello, all. I recall during the pods on the Battle of Guadalcanal comments that were made about the campaign being the war of attrition that broke the back of the Japanese army. The figures I've seen for Guadalcanal range from approximately 19,000 KIA to 30,000 KIA. But couldn't you make the argument that the New Guinea campaign was the real meat grinder of the IJA? The figures I've seen there are rangings of 200,000 when you include Papua New Guinea, 127, Bougainville, 44, New Britain, New Ireland, Admiralty Islands, 30,000. These figures are from Japanese Ministry of Health and Welfare compiled in 1964. Interested in your thoughts on this. I have to admit I'm biased because my grandfather served in the 31st Infantry Division during that campaign, and I believe the fighting here is routinely overlooked as compared to others. Again, best regards, David. I think that is fascinating. So, batter up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just in a way the Japanese who die there are dying a different way than they're likely to die on Guadalcanal. On Guadalcanal, in a firefight, perhaps, or in combat, probably. Although not exclusively, there's people who are down with disease and facing starvation by the end. On New Guinea, certainly have plenty of tactical fighting, but it's really in the longer term. As one Japanese soldier put it, the prevalent phrase in his unit was, "From New Guinea, no one comes back alive."
Right.
And they called the jungle basically a green desert because they're getting cut off, they're getting no supplies, they're starving, racked by tropical diseases. I mean, it's so one guy I can think of remembered his unit going in with about 500 to 700 soldiers, and I think only maybe 60 survived the war and made it out of there. That's the kind of thing that's happening, and it's not necessarily always from being attrited by American and Australian firepower. It's
Starvation
all
and
these other
disease.
factors. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And of course, it goes on longer than Guadalcanal because in New Guinea, we're fighting over the course of the better part of 2.5 years. Whereas Guadalcanal is what, 6 months, I think,
6 months.
roughly, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, don't forget the headhunters.
Well, that's
Oh,
true
that too.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of we always called it the suffering meter. The suffering meter in New Guinea was higher than the suffering meter on Guadalcanal, and that is not taking anything away from the Marines and the soldiers that were on the canal because it was a hellhole. But if you just look at the Bunagona campaign and you look at the
Oh,
American soldiers and the Aussies too, those guys are in deplorable condition. They are just racked with disease. I mean, it's far worse. And I'm talking Allied troops,
Yeah.
far worse than anything that was experienced on Guadalcanal.
Which is
Anything
saying
at all.
something.
Which
Yeah.
is saying something. Yeah. And that's
yeah,
not
in
taking anything away from the
1943.
canal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in 1943, MacArthur's command on New Guinea has about 4 to 5 guys out of the field with disease for every one they're losing in combat against the Japanese. Now, most of those guys will survive. They're in a case of malaria or yellow fever is what it typically
Yeah, but
is.
they're not
But
there. Yeah.
there's an average man day loss of 27 days, and they're likely to have a recurrence.
Yep.
So I mean, yeah, the suffering meter is very high on New Guinea, and if it's that high for the Allied troops, imagine what it is for the Japanese.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I've told this story on the podcast before, but I had drinks a few years ago with a guy whose dad was a medic in New Guinea. And he told me that in the 1960s, his dad picked up a newspaper, and there was some article in there about, the 10 most deadly tropical diseases. And his dad was like, "Yep, got that one. Yeah, got that one too. Got that one. Got that one. Got that one." He had like 6 of the 10. So yeah, it was a terrible place. Um, in terms of aggregate Japanese military deaths, though, the two really big killing grounds for them were, interestingly enough, the Philippines, because the late war campaigns just killed a ton of Japanese soldiers. And then again in Manchuria, the losses in those, the last 2 weeks to 3 weeks against the Soviets were extremely high. But
Well,
yeah,
and
New Guinea's no slouch. I mean, I do think they lose around 200,000 troops down there too. It's
At
bad.
least.
and
Yeah.
a lot of those guys get cut off by those. I don't want to call them island hopping, but the leapfrogging
Yep.
that Mac does up the
Holanda.
coast.
Yep.
Invasion of Hollandia in April.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Taipei, places like that, they cut those guys off, and those dudes are just, they're
Merry
out there.
Christmas. Yeah,
Which is
star.
why we have the Driniyamar campaign in mid-1944, where they're desperate to get out of that, being cut off and trying to fight their way out of this mess. And of course, it doesn't work.
Yeah. But yeah, to the original question, yes, New Guinea kills far more Imperial Army troops than Guadalcanal does.
Hello, love the podcast, World War II TV, and you are my favorite World War II history YouTube channel. There you go. Can you talk about the value and importance of leadership of Generals Vandergrift and Geiger to the victory in the Guadalcanal campaign? Thank you, Scott G.
I
Go
don't
ahead, John.
think Geiger is the heart and soul of that whole defense. Or not Geiger, excuse me, Vandegrift.
Vandegrift. Yeah.
Vandegrift is the dude. He's so good. I superlatives fail. He understands what he is up against from a tactical standpoint. He understands the effects that the jungle is going to have on his enemy, to the point that he can then throw out the book and say, "Yeah, we're not doing it a defense in depth. We're doing a cordon defense," which is, the kiss of death in most modern military operations. But here in the jungle, it makes sense for us to do this. I think he's a wonderful general. I really like Geiger as well, although I think Geiger is important, obviously, from an air standpoint. But if you look at some of the battles on Guadalcanal, particularly Bloody Ridge, Vandegrift is gone for that. Or no,
Henderson Field.
Henderson Field. Yeah, Vandegrift is up in Noumea talking to Halsey, the new theater commander, in October. And so it's the XO officer for First Mardiv, and I'm spacing his name.
Thomas.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought it was, yeah.
Thomas.
Well, Rupertus was, but Thomas is running that operation for Henderson
Rupertus
Field.
is sick.
Yeah, it's Thomas. It's Gerald Thomas.
Yeah, so Vandegrift not only is a great leader, but he's got a great staff too. He's got really good officers in his subordinate billets. But yeah, Vandegrift, that guy he was amazing.
Vandegrift had the guts to stick it out, and to your point exactly. But Geiger gets a lot of credit for the Guadalcanal campaign, and Geiger's a great guy. Don't get me wrong, I love him to death, and especially later war, because he was the guy. He learned how to work. And both Johns, we've talked about this. He learned how to work with the other services.
Yep.
And he was a godsend after the whole Holland Smith debacle. But in terms of Guadalcanal, he's pulled out of there in November. So he does August, September, October. By November, he's gone. The guy that's in charge of the aerial campaign ashore is the guy we mentioned a little while ago, Lewis Woods, Brigadier General Lewis Woods. He's the guy that's in charge of the aerial campaign on Guadalcanal because he's physically on there. So Geiger, I think he gets a little more credit for Guadalcanal than he probably should. His credit after Guadalcanal is 100% deserved. 100% deserved.
I would argue that's his shining moment later, like Guam.
I would agree.
And maybe Okinawa and Peleliu, only to the extent that he maybe saves a good part of the First Marine Division from Rupertus's craziness of not wanting to be reinforced by the Army's 81st Infantry Division. And Puller, who was just going to keep ramming his head against the wall, kind of thing. So Geiger had to step in, and he probably should have stepped in sooner.
I
But
was going to say that's my only
yeah,
ding is that he waited as long as he did to step in. He should have stepped in about 2 weeks before. And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
day 4. It said,
yeah,
yeah,
or earlier. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Why weren't the first Marines deployed at Guadalcanal issued Garands? Weren't they the first infantry division shipped out to the Pacific after hostilities commenced? Was it because the Army got first dibs on the new equipment? Their firepower would have been multiplied by that weapon. Love your show, Todd, an Army vet.
That's a huge myth. So the Marine Corps actually they did have the option to acquire the M1 Garand and they declined it. There were
Although
several
some of their units had it on Guadalcanal, and
Second Raider Battalion did.
I know this
Yeah.
because I was just on Dave Holland's podcast 2 days ago, and he talked about this for like 20 minutes. There
Yeah.
is no one answer. I mean, there were Garands and Marine units, and there were
There were
1903s and Army units, and it's just
there were Garands in the Philippines in 41. So I mean, that whole myth is that, the Army got all the good stuff and the Marine Corps didn't. That's a bunch of malarkey. When the 1st Marine Division deploys to the Pacific for Operation Watchtower, they are the finest equipped American division that's been deployed to the Pacific thus far in the war. Period. They are. They've got the most stuff. They might not have the newest stuff, but they've got the most stuff, and they were replete with automatic weapons.
yes,
And when that BARs, 1917s, there were 1919s there, 50 cals out the wazoo, Model 55 Risings, which were crap, admittedly, but they had them.
Adam,
But Thompsons,
Thompson.
so I mean, yeah, they
good
were
good divisional arty as well. They have an
probably the
attached
best,
yeah,
frankly.
and they have an attached defense battalion as well.
Yeah.
Some of whose guys are using Garands.
Right,
So
right, yeah. So I mean,
right,
that whole myth of that, like that's perpetuated in the Pacific. We're fighting the stuff what my granddaddy fought with. Yeah, but so are other people too. You're not the Lone Ranger, and I think that's something that's true, but it's something that needs to be dispelled because it's a popular myth, and it ain't true.
yeah.
Based on your personal interactions with U.S. veterans from both the European and Pacific theaters, what do you believe contributed to the higher incidences of battle fatigue, now recognized as PTSD, in the Pacific theater? Zombie P wants to know.
I, I don't think that I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I don't think there's a higher rate in the Pacific than there was in Europe because I knew plenty of guys in Europe and plenty of guys in the Pacific that both had it and would readily admit that. And I'm not just talking infantrymen either. I'm talking pilots, air crewmen, sailors. So I don't know if there was I mean, I don't know, guys. What do y'all think? I don't think
I
there was one had
I
more
think
than the
there's
other.
I think it's true, but I think there's one exception to that, and it's the New Georgia campaign for the 43rd Infantry Division,
Mm,
where they are just losing hundreds and hundreds of people to combat fatigue, and in part because they don't necessarily know how to treat it just yet.
Yeah.
And their thinking initially is these guys just need to be taken out of here because they're bonkers, so this is where
Russian
this is where
left.
we
Yeah.
start to see, the treatment is going to be very well known later of no, what you do is you give them a hot meal, you give them a new suit of clothes, you give them a pep talk, you rehabilitate them, and you send them forward, and that's the best
You let
thing for
them
them. Also,
sleep in
conveniently,
many cases
give
too.
them sleep. That's part of what's going on too. I think it's also a byproduct of the American tendency to cede the night to our enemies at that point in time, especially in that particular battle. So you do have instances in the Pacific War where you've got kind of a spike in combat fatigue versus Europe, but also in Europe, I think the conditions sometimes are an even bigger difference maker, like during the Battle of the Bulge, of how cold it is and
Yeah.
icy and snowy,
Anzio.
and also Italy in 43, 44, 44,
Yeah.
45. That tends to take a bite out of more guys, I think, than do the tropics, although New Guinea could be the exception for that. In that instance, in New Guinea, we're not necessarily talking about combat fatigue so much as, of course, disease and also morale. The terrible morale you've got from trying to exist in this horrible place.
Yeah.
So, but I agree with Seth that I knew plenty who had combat fatigue, from
Yeah.
European theater, Pacific. It didn't quite
I
matter.
think I think another aspect when you talk about PTS, that you see a spike, and I think we can all agree at this, it's Okinawa. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
and it's for multiple reasons, not the least of which is you mentioned it just a second ago, John, the not necessarily the terrain, but the climate, especially during May and early
Yeah,
June when
you're
it's
fighting
just,
in a monsoon. It's
yeah, and
horrible there.
Yeah.
it's just pissing rain and you're in mud up to your waist,
Yeah,
and nothing gets dry and you're literally laying next to dead people, many of whom are your friends,
yeah,
and
yeah,
civilians are getting waylaid left and right, and it starts to weigh on these people,
yeah,
and they break.
yeah.
And I think you see that more on Okinawa. And I think I don't want to go into what ifs, but I think if we land in Japan, it's probably 10 times worse.
For sure.
It's
Well,
bad.
and Eugene Sledge had said about, Okinawa, he felt like they'd been flung into Hell's Own cesspool.
Yeah,
That
Yeah, into the
the
abyss. Yeah.
degradation of that. And it also had too, that's probably the most intense Japanese artillery opposition that you
yes,
have in the war. And I
Mhm.
think that plays a role in it a little bit too.
Yep.
agreed.
Good job, guys. Greetings, gentlemen. Did the Allies have any hard intelligent assets in country in Japan? I've and read a lot about U.S. knowledge of the location of cottage manufacture areas and what specifically was produced in what factory. And I don't know if aerial reconnaissance would be able to have that capability. Could this intel have been gleaned from signals? Thank you for the time and the contributions of this wonderful podcast. Bradley from Klondike, Wisconsin.
Great
Go
question,
go
Bradley.
for it, guys. I don't know that.
No, the answer is no. So far as I know, there was not hardly any human intel coming out of Japan in the same way that we were getting it from people like the French Resistance or something like that. There's a book on this topic, The Elusive Enemy, that came out within the last 10 years. And yeah, he basically argues that, I hate to say it, but just because um, the Japanese people as a whole were extremely loyal to the government, and you're certainly not going to get American spies in there
Right.
because we look like we do and they look like they do. That ain't going to play. You couldn't parachute somebody into Japan in the same way that you could parachute them into France or Germany. It just wasn't going to happen. And so yeah, all of our intel is being based off of signals intel, photographic intel, code breaking intel, traffic analysis, that kind of stuff. Nothing was coming out other than in places like the Philippines. We're getting lots of
Sure.
hard intel out of there. But in Japan proper, nothing.
My last question for you, and this is just something we've done in a previous podcast, so I'm fascinated to hear if Steven Spielberg is listening to our podcast right now, and you could give him
Which he
one
ain't.
thing to do a movie on, what would it be, Professor?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Maybe this medic who saves a bunch of people at Hacksaw Ridge. No, I'm just kidding.
The dentist, dude. The dentist.
The
Ben
dentist,
Solomon.
the
Ben
dentist.
Yeah.
Solomon.
Actually, that's a great thought. That's probably what I would say. Ben Solomon is so interesting in his
So
civilian life
badass.
too, just how he
Yeah.
grows up and the kind of person that he was, and certainly, big time badass. But he's also by the testimony of people in the unit, he was a really good dentist too. So he's good at his profession.
Okay.
And then that's why I think it's kind of interesting that once he becomes a battalion surgeon, he decides, you know what, I'm going to med school after the war. He was one of these people who could just kind of seemingly do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that'd be pretty interesting cinema, much
Yeah.
less obviously what he does on Saipan. I would love to unpack that and see that happen. That is a pretty like major American hero story.
And
So
and
yeah,
last thing, tell everybody about your upcoming podcast.
yeah. So
Yes.
our mutual buddy Kevin Hemel and I have launched a new podcast called World War II Live. We've got Mark Festoso producing it. I know you may know him. So basically what we do is we cover tons of different topics about World War II. We spend about half of each episode talking about the topic, but then we do like basically what we're doing here. We call it Stump the Chumps. You send in your questions to World War II Live at gmail.com, and that's two like an Arabic numeral. And we take the questions cold, and we try not to look too stupid, which is really difficult in my case, as you guys know. So we do the best we can. But so we got a YouTube channel, just World War II Live, and then we're on all the main audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, so on and so forth.
Do you need a narrator to help you with the Q&A?
Yeah, maybe so. That could be a lot of fun. Yeah,
We
because
need
we're
we
getting
need we
it,
need to
Sean.
do
We're
some
getting a ton
cross.
of questions too. It's the same problem we're having here tonight. It's like,
Yeah.
how do we, decide on
How
the
do you wade
questions?
through them?
Yeah,
Yeah, we need to do some cross-pollination soon, man.
Yeah.
that's right.
We do.
All
Yeah,
right.
I appreciate that. That would be great. Let's
That would be
do.
fun. All
Yep.
right. Well, we know you got a split.
Yep.
So John, thank you very much for being with us, and we will see you again very soon. We're
Yep.
not done. We're going to take a break. And John, my brother, be well.
Yeah, you too. Take care,
Thanks.
brothers.
Hello, love the podcast. My question is, were there any instances of soldiers/sailors going AWOL in the Pacific theater during the war? I understand in
Absolutely.
Europe it was more prevalent during the larger battlefields, towns, soldiers kind of blend in. With the remoteness of the Pacific battlefields, I assume it must have dissuaded a few people from being deserters. This is from Hayden, Jacksonville, Florida, kind of a Thin Red Line movie, if y'all remember that one where he goes AWOL.
I
What do
call
you
it the thick brown turd, but
go ahead?
it's a horrible movie. Great book, horrible movie. But no, were there? Yeah, absolutely. When these guys got to Australia, when they got to New Zealand, when they got to Hawaii, yeah, yeah. I mean, not every, there's again common myth in our mind. Greatest generation. Everybody wanted to fight. No, they didn't. Most of the vast majority of the United States Army in 1944 and 45 were draftees.
Yeah.
Those guys
Wow.
did not necessarily, some of them I'm sure were like, yeah, fine. But, they did not necessarily want to be there. So absolutely, if there was an opportunity and somebody didn't want to be there, they took it, man. They were going over the hill.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's it
Yeah.
on islands? I guess in
On
the
the islands,
Philippines.
I would say no, I mean,
Not
because
as much
where are
there.
you going to go?
Right. But in
Again,
Australia, yeah, I've got an Australian girlfriend. I'm very happy here.
peace. Yeah.
Peace,
Goodbye.
peace out. Yeah.
Yeah. Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii,
Yeah.
yeah, friggin' yeah.
All right.
Not
Good.
everybody was a willing
It did
participant.
happen. It did happen.
Mhm.
Seth, you guys have mentioned a few times turning in 50 cals for 20 millimeters. On your podcast, I remember reading that Captain Buckmaster did not turn in his 50 cal, stating that a swab handle could be inserted into a railing and cut off and mounting a 50 cal for a temporary increase in AA firepower. Any truth to this? I'm not sure of the book I read it in. I was in
I
grade
don't even know.
school, so it was in the 60s. But Matthew, USAF Air Force, wants to know. Have you guys heard anything about that?
No,
I've
no, and
never heard anything about that. No.
never heard that. And I remember, John, when we did the Yorktown wreck footage stuff, and it was a combination. Old Yorkie had a combination of 20s and 50s.
For
And it was a
sure.
matter of there weren't enough 20s in the yard
Yeah.
to bolt down on Yorktown. It wasn't because Buckmaster didn't want it. That was stupid. No, because the rounds are bigger, it's more firepower, it's a higher
Yeah.
rate of fire. He's going to want whatever he can get to defend his ship. There just weren't enough of them to bolt on the deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So she went out with some 50s for sure.
hmm
Yeah.
So
Just
did
because
Lex.
that's, yeah,
Lexington did
just
too.
because that's what we had.
Okay.
Correct.
Guys, love the show. My grandfather was in the 11th Airborne. The 11th
Sweet.
have any planned missions that were scrubbed? I know that happened to the 101st in the ETO when Patton's Third Army overran the planned drop zone. Thanks for the great work. It sure really helped me through some of my cancer treatments last year. Sean,
Oh, God bless you.
near Buffalo,
God
New
bless you.
York. God bless
Yeah.
you, man. Good luck. We all want the Bills to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. As a cancer survivor myself, kick its butt.
Good
So
luck, man.
yeah.
Then he scrubbed 11th Airborne drops. Have y'all?
This is where we need James Fenelon,
I
but
know,
I don't
where
know.
is my inner James Fenelon here? And I don't know the answer to that, but yeah, the book you would want to read would be Angels Against the Sun by James Fenelon, talking about 11th Airborne, and you would probably get the deets in there. He's a great author. His maps are wonderful. He's a great guy. I just toured with him in Japan, so yeah, his book is great. Pick it up.
I've never met the man, but he will be on our show in the future.
Yeah,
Cool.
I've read his books and they are very good.
they're good.
Hello, gentlemen. Sean and Sean. All right. Love the show.
Gentlemen and
And Sean. All right. That sounds
I
about
like that.
right. Thank you for
Oh, by the way, repping Old Salt coffee with my shirt. I don't know if anybody
Attaboy.
caught that or not.
That's what we like to see.
There
Yeah.
you go. My question, you mentioned how key land-based artillery was in several episodes. Could you please discuss any developments, changes in artillery tactics, doctrine, order of battle, or technology for Marine U.S. Army Allied Forces that took place prior or during the war? I would also welcome the same discussion of Japanese if you want. Just like to hear you riff a bit on that. Thanks again. Respectfully, Christian B.
Changes that you see happening in Marine artillery,
More tubes.
more tubes and bigger tubes. So if you look at First Mardiv and Guadalcanal, they're mostly rocking 75s, although they do have a battalion of 105s.
Yeah, there's some 105s.
And as Dave pointed out to me too, the defense battalion there ends up getting a battery or two of 155 long toms, which can definitely reach out and touch somebody. So yeah, you're going to see an increase in tubes and larger tubes as well. In terms of doctrine, now I don't know this for a fact, but my guess is going to be that you're going to see the same things happening in the PTO as you do in the ETO. That we have these sort of pre-programmed fire tables that allow us to do time on target missions. And again, for the sake of our audience, time on target means I'm going to take multiple batteries of artillery. I've got a target out there, and I know that this battery is slightly further away than that battery. So this battery is going to fire first, and then the other batteries are going to chime in such that when those shells land, they're all going to come down at the same time. Because the deal is with any sort of an artillery shoot, once the target goes, comes under fire, very quickly the people on the receiving end of that are like, where's my hole? Where's my shelter? I'm going to get into a hole. And the lethality of that bombardment, decreases drastically after really the first 30 seconds or so. What a time on target shoot allows you to do is say, okay, there's this target out here, and we're going to dump 100 shells on this thing within like 3 seconds. And those guys are not going to have the chance to go to ground. And this is something that Dave Holland talked about just 2 days ago when I was talking with him, that the Marines got really good at saying, okay, if the Japanese are attacking us at this point, at this location on the line, I know for damn sure that there are going to be supporting echelons behind that initial Japanese attack that are strung back into the jungle. I'm going to lay down a barrage that's not only going to hit the immediate combat area, but is going to go in the general vector of where I think that column of troops is. I'm just going to plaster them deep in the jungle as well and basically wipe out the reinforcements. So I think there's an argument to be made that British fire control likewise was very sophisticated. But when it comes to having a combination not only of great fire control, but just enormous stacks of shells, nobody does that like the Americans do. And so, yeah, our ability to flexibly control artillery shoots, land huge concentrations of shells within a very short amount of time, and also to be able to put fire down basically at any point in a defensive perimeter within, 2 minutes was unparalleled. So there you go.
Seth, you got anything?
And the only thing I was going to add, and it's not really anything to add, is just to pile on to what John was saying, is that if you look at the Battle of Manila in 1945, Mac, I don't want to say he refuses artillery, but he essentially does because he doesn't want to destroy the city. But by the closer to the end, he realizes that there's no hope to save the city. So we're going to bring down the hurt.
Yeah.
And when they bring down the hurt, they bring down the hurt.
Yeah.
The artillery barrage, huh?
I was just going to say, yeah, pictures from the Intramuros
Oh, Jesus.
area after that fight are just Holy God. Yeah.
When
Anyway,
when Sixth Army, and to a point Eighth Army too, but mostly Sixth, opens fire towards those latter stages of the Manila assault, they pulverize the city, because at that point Mac's whole thing of like, I need to save my city, and that's gone because it has been destroyed. So they pull out quite literally all the stops, and the artillery barrage, and I don't know this 100% for sure, but I'm about 98% sure that the artillery barrage that's unleashed on Manila towards the end of that fight is the heaviest artillery barrage of the Pacific campaign thus far. Thus far.
thus far.
Be-
It's
because
going to be exceeded
Okinawa
in Okinawa.
exceeds that. Okinawa
Yeah.
exceeds that, but thus far. And my point in that is that the pounding that that city takes, it turned. You look at the pictures, it turns things into freaking piles of powder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, insofar as that, does tactics change? No, I don't think it does. It's just it's the availability and the concentration of artillery that's in Manila or around Manila at that time. And you're talking, early
Understood.
1945, Sixth Army as we're moving through trying to take that city. And that concentration was not available anywhere else, with the exception before that point, anywhere else with the exception of Saipan shooting the Tinian
Bingo.
and Leyte when they're moving up through Ormoc and things like that, and they're doing that end around. But even then, it doesn't compare to Manila at that stage. So that's
Yeah.
me.
The only thing that comes to mind for me, and you guys tell
And those
me,
are 155s too, by the way, that are, I mean, not all, but that's what mostly is bringing it down on Manila.
is maybe there might have been some adjustment to doctrine with counter battery fire. That's the only thing they probably would have tried to develop, right? Figuring out what the Japanese could and couldn't do, and then countering that, John.
Well,
I
we
don't know.
were already pretty good at counter battery. We could use acoustic means, and by the end of the war, we're starting to use radar as well to do
There you go.
backtracking. So yeah, there are developments there as well. That's one of the sort of unsung elements of the fight on Okinawa that never really gets talked about. We focus on the sacrifices of the infantry forces in that battle of digging the Japanese out of those ridge lines. But the other thing that's going down is that, yeah, we are methodically playing whack-a-mole with the biggest Japanese artillery park in the Pacific War and using counter battery shoots to slowly just degrade that artillery park so that by the end, when we're putting in our final attacks against the Shuri line, they are not being supported by the volume of Japanese artillery fire that we'd started that campaign with.
Gotcha. Good answer, guys. This is from one of your small but mighty group of female subscribers.
Yay.
Philogene O. I hope I pronounced that right, ma'am. So I did my best there. She wants to buy and frame some good maps of the Pacific War for her office.
Talk
Any
to John.
recommendations on good sources? I've looked online, pickings are slim. She loves the podcast. She's a World War II Pacific Theater devotee. After a lifetime of not caring at all about history, your format is really perfect to those non-history folks, and she's addicted to the topic. Do you guys have anything on that for her?
First of all, just thanks for the kind words, and I'm glad that we somehow make this accessible for people. That's great. Um, yeah, good maps are hard to come by. That's why I make my own. I will say that the University of Texas at Austin has a really big online map collection. I don't know that they would have the kind of stuff that you're looking for, though. But Seth,
So the Army, the U.S. Army for AHEC, the Army Center for Military History, is they have all the Army maps, campaign maps, and things. And a lot of those are accessible online. In the years past, you could buy the maps on DVD or CD, DVD, whatever the hell.
mm,
I'm talking, this is several years, clearly several years ago. And they were big, beautiful, high res JPEGs, maybe TIFFs. Does that print well? I mean, I don't know. How big do you want it? But I mean, some of those maps are out there. What?
I literally just contacted that same museum or
Carlisle Barracks. I'm sorry. But anyway, go ahead.
well, I just did Texas. What the Texas does, state Texas, I I mean, not to get too much into it, but I wrote my thesis on the Battle of Val Verde. It's a Civil War battlefield, but they sent me a JPEG that I had access to. You have to put in a request form for like 30 days. And what I would recommend is that you can take that to a frame shop, and any good frame shop will be able to actually download it and print it out. And that's how I got my print. It was a battlefield print. So to kind of add on that is it was Texas that happened to have that, Seth?
Yeah.
No, no, I was talking about it's Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania is where the Army Center for Military History is, or at least was.
Okay.
But and also if you go to get those printed and they're like, we can't print this, it's public domain, so you absolutely can. It's property of the
Right.
United States government, which means
Yeah.
it's ours, so you
It's
can
ours.
print it.
Good. Great answer, guys. Greetings from Colacan City, Philippines. Did I say that right, guys? Caloocan.
I don't
Sorry.
know. I'd like to go to the Philippines. It might be cool.
John wants to know, I'm an avid watcher listener of the great podcast, and I'm actually listening to episode 529 while writing this question. We all know that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and a few hours later the Philippines. During the defense of the Philippines, is there really a relief convoy that was on its way to the Philippines to relieve or at least supplement the defense there? Thanks.
Well, the Pensacola convoy was bound there.
Uh, does he mean a big convoy, like something from the States coming?
Anything,
So,
anything.
yeah,
What are
no.
we looking at, guys?
So the Pensacola convoy, which is named for the cruiser Pensacola that was escorting it, and I forget the exact, um, what they had on board that convoy. There were some artillery regiments because they end up down in Java, among other places. So yes, there have been a steady stream of material being moved out from the States and, plunked down in the Philippines. And this is just another one of those, routine convoys that was on its way, and it was in the middle of the Pacific when the balloon goes up, and then, Marshall and whoever has got to figure out where the heck is this thing going to go. They do not end up in the Philippines. Like I say, a large percentage of that ends up down in Indonesia and is captured there during the final combat there. But this is one of the points that makes MacArthur really, really grumpy. That in his mind, why hasn't the Navy run up these relief missions from Australia and whatnot? And he had no understanding of the sheer quality and quantity of air and naval assets that the Japanese threw around the Philippine Islands. There was no ability to get any sort of a convoy in there to reinforce the Philippines. This is just not happening.
It would have
Seth?
been a waste of man. No, no, he's right. I mean, it would have been a waste of manpower and machines.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was pretty much the Philippines. We said this. I don't remember what episode it was, but the Philippines are pretty much written off. Almost. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true.
Yeah.
They were pretty
You
much
can take
written
care of it
off
before the war, right?
to a point. To a point, but
Yeah.
we were sending things over there to reinforce um, what was
MacArthur.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, Mac, yeah, but I mean, like the B-17s that were sent over there, he got all shot up and everything else. But I mean, we were sending stuff over there to reinforce, so there was an effort to do that. This is before the war, but like after the war starts, we pretty much wrote it off because we had nothing to get anything over there with, and that's what
Yeah.
we said, before that, when we get to that stage soon enough, we'll talk about that. And MacArthur's hatred for the Navy and is that he just to John's point, he had no earthly clue what he was even talking about because he didn't know you got to get that stuff over there somehow. It doesn't just, you don't just wiggle your nose and poof, there it is. You have to bring it
Yeah.
there. And we did not have the assets to bring it there, nor do we have the assets to send there, much less
Mhm.
bring them there. You didn't have it anywhere to get it over there. So
The-
it's good.
there were some attempts on the part of Marshall to hire private shipping to go and run the blockade, if you will, up into the Philippines. And so they waved sacks of cash in front of various tramp freighters, down in Australia and whatnot. What will it take you to run the gauntlet? And very few skippers were willing to. They had a very fine appreciation of what it is that they were going to potentially be running, And the
Yeah.
couple that did try to get up there, met unpleasant fates. So yeah, it was just not happening.
Sad
All
as it
right.
was.
Hey, Seth, John, and Sean.
Hi.
Fraser from Australia here. Hey, Fraser. Seth, your beautiful German Shepherd's occasional guest appearance
He's right
got me
here.
thinking about man's best friend in the Pacific. How
Mm.
frequently were war dogs used, and what were their main roles, and how effective did they turn out to be throughout the conflict? Absolutely love the show. You guys make young Aussies Wednesday morning something to look forward to. Cheers, Fraser.
They were used quite often. They were used a lot on Guam. As a matter of fact, there is a war dog cemetery slash memorial on Guam. Most of the dogs that were used in the Pacific were German Shepherds and Dobermans. The Marine Corps used war dogs highly effectively, especially in Guam, especially in the Marianas in general, and on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. So did the Army. I knew a guy named Bill Garbo, who was a war dog handler. He was the United States Army, and he was in the Philippines. And yeah, they were used constantly. After I can't say as to when the first deployment of war dogs was in in the Pacific. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, they were used, war dogs were used everywhere. They were used in the United States too to patrol, eastern coast beaches. But yeah, they were used very, very often. And they were highly effective at sniffing, quite literally, sniffing out Japanese defensive emplacements and or um, stragglers, I guess is a proper term, finding people that were behind the lines after the lines had already advanced past certain positions and things like that. No, they were, and they're still used. They're still used today. Belgian Malinois, German Shepherds, Dobermans. Yeah,
Yeah.
Good answer, Seth. There you
great
go.
dogs. Great
War
dogs.
dogs. I've really learned so much listening to your show. Thanks for all the hard work you put into each episode.
My war dog is the most unwar dog there is right now. He is sacked out.
Right.
Looked like he took a torpedo on the starboard
Yeah.
side. I mean,
Uh,
down.
Wondering, let's see. My question is, why was General Homa allowed the honorable death of a firing squad versus General
Mashta.
Yamashita being hung? Thanks again, Don from Marlton, New Jersey. Really appreciate setting the record straight on Lindbergh. Why? What was the difference on that? Anybody know?
I don't know,
I
John.
I do not know the answer to that question. Yeah.
Well, it just
Couldn't tell.
is whatever way we get the job done, boys. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter
right.
how it's conducted.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's well, never mind. That's another conversation for another day.
Yeah, I don't know.
Gents, love the show. I hope it never ends. Okay.
Look at your little eyebrows, Seth.
I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
there is a finite amount of topics.
I only have so many trips around the sun left in me. But
Yeah.
to that end, I'm having a great time doing it. I can't see us stopping anytime
Same.
soon. So
Christmas
you're
morning,
we
boys.
we
Christmas.
got
Yeah.
some ideas. We got some ideas for stuff coming up that's
My
we haven't done
question for
before.
you. I've always been fascinated with the island hopping campaign and what islands were passed over. In earlier seasons, it was mentioned that say it, I can't say.
Kolomangara.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It was a beehive of activity that the U.S. passed over. Which other islands, outside the obvious, Japan, Formosa, did we not invade that otherwise could have led to yet another costly battle? Thank you, Kevin.
Yap.
Mm.
Yap is one that stands out in my mind immediately because that Yap and what was the other one in the Marshalls, John? There were two that Nimitz's staff were like, we got to hit these places. And Nimitz is like, what are you, stupid? Because they're full of Japanese. We're not going to hit those places. We're going to move around those places. We're going to go to Kwajalein and, these places here. There was Yap and
Well,
Tuape, I think is the other one.
yeah. Well, of course, the big one is Rabal.
Rabal, obviously, yeah. But they were,
Ain't going there.
yeah, no, hell no. How many? There were like 100,000 Japanese on Rabal?
100,000
Ish?
Japanese.
Yeah, thank you. No.
No.
Was there any in the Philippines that we didn't go after?
Absolutely. I don't know how many islands off the top of my head are in the archipelago, but as we said, I don't know, a week or two ago when we were talking about this on the last Q&A, I think with Bill, is that, Sixth Army gets the lion's share of the credit for taking the Philippines. That's Kruger's. Or no,
Yeah.
this is when we did with JD. But it's Eichelberger's eighth that takes the vast majority of the Philippine archipelago, and they cut off a lot of the islands that they were like, we're not going there. There's no need to. There's,
Yeah.
X amount of thousand Japanese there. We'll just cut them off.
I
So yeah,
just
that happened a lot.
I just found a map actually that I use. Yeah, Yap, Palau. We did not take the main place, Koror in Palau. We didn't take that. Watchi in the Marshalls. We did not take Jalowit in the Marshalls. We did not take Wake, of course. Nauru and Ocean Islands and the Gilberts we bypassed. We did not go to Caviang in New Ireland, and of course Truk. We never went to Truk either. So yeah, there were Marcus Island as well, which is technically in it's kind of its own thing, but it's a little north of the Marianas. We did not go to Rota in the Marianas as well. So yeah, there were a whole bunch of different places. Yeah, we totally blew off.
Okay. Good job, John. You really came through on that one.
Real time, baby. Yeah.
There you go.
History, man. Man, that was better than I expected. Did the Japanese Navy use any high-speed small craft similar to the American PT boat? I hear about their small craft referred to as barges, but nothing compared to MTBs or German E-boats. Mike.
No, they had a lot of those actually, and particularly towards the end of the war. I remember going and looking this up in one of the Navy reference books that I have. So yeah, they had a fair number of torpedo boats, but they just didn't have a lot of applicable places to employ them. I gotta think though that they probably used them in some of the later fights around Okinawa. I would not be surprised to find them in the garrison troops in Karama-Reto, just off of Okinawa, because you see, among other things, there too, a lot of those Shinyo suicide boats being used. But yeah, the bottom line is that the Japanese did have more motor torpedo boats in the same way that we did, but yeah, you hear very little about them.
Yeah, the Shinyo boats, they had a flock of those damn things in Okinawa. I
Yeah,
forget,
they
we
did.
talked about that. There were dozens and dozens and
Dozens.
dozens and dozens of them.
Yeah,
But yeah,
stuffed away in
I
cave.
don't know how speedy those things were, though. I
I
really
think they
don't know.
went, I think they did like 40 knots or something like that. They were,
That's pretty quick. Yeah,
yeah, that's relatively zippy. So,
yeah.
All right, I'll try to keep it short. So in the past week's episode 923, you guys discussed during FDR's phenomenal speech, he gambled that Germany would declare war in response to our declaration on Japan. Was there a plan in place if the mustache man hadn't made such a bold?
Mustache.
In other words, would we have helped in Burma, Singapore, and other various holdings and then hung our hat after Japan's defeat? That's from Bryson.
I,
that's go for it,
it's a
Seth.
that's a great question, but the U.S. is going to war with Germany. It's going to happen. I don't think FDR is not going to declare war on Germany. That was abundantly clear. I think he had
Well,
enough. And you
I think
think?
yeah, I do. I think once we're at war with Japan, the next time an American destroyer gets a pot shot taken at it
Yeah.
by a
Okay. Yeah.
U-boat
Fair
out in the
enough.
Atlantic,
Fair
it's like,
enough.
oh, casus belli, now we're at war with you
Yeah.
guys too.
Fair enough. But I don't think. I think what I was trying to say is he's not just going to say we're at war with Japan and Germany too. I think yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with you 100%. If somebody, not if, when they take a pot
when.
shot, then that's his excuse. But it was inevitable because he had figured on a war with Germany, even when he also figured that a war with Japan was coming as well.
Yeah, and the German U-boat Waffe was just itching for a fight against the Americans to make us put up or shut up. As far as okay, you've claimed all of these sea lanes basically halfway across the Atlantic, but can you actually fight for them? We want to know the answer to that. So Donuts's force was itching for an excuse to go after the Americans, and they had sunk the Reuben James. That was Eric Tope that sunk that ship. There was going to be a war at some point, and it was probably going to happen as a result of a fracas between a sub and an American escort.
Well, he said he loves the podcast. He feels like he's at a bar with us hanging out. So
That's what we want.
that's what we're
And
looking
tonight you
for.
literally are,
I
and
was going to
we
say, and you
yeah,
are.
cheers, yes.
Um, Hi, Seth, John, and Sean. My question is about military history as a profession. I'm a third year undergrad right now, but I have
Don't
big
do it.
dreams of
Yeah.
becoming a naval military history professor historian. Do you guys have any suggestions pertaining to this endeavor? Is military
No.
still a viable option to pursue in academia? I'd love the podcast and I aspire to contribute to the Pacific War historiography like you guys in the future. Please, best Josh from University of Maine. Guys, just give him some advice.
It's Josh Klein. I know Josh. Josh and I have corresponded before. Um, there are a limited number of jobs out there for military historians, not going to lie.
Yep.
But you absolutely have the ability to contribute to the field just as, we do. There's plenty of room, I think, in this field for people that are not necessarily employed as military historians per se to do good work and put books out there and do good stuff. I'm not going to say don't pursue your dream. I think particularly at the age that you are, you absolutely should, but it would not be a bad thing to have a plan B. You know, if that doesn't work out, how else can I put food on the table? I was a tech guy for 35 years. That's how I put food on the table. So go for it, Seth.
Yeah, so I would say two things in this. Have if I had to do it all over again, even though I am not a fan of academia, having something like our friend who had to exit early, John McManus has that professorial
Yeah,
position is
there
very,
are
very
positions
nice to
out there.
have.
Yeah,
And that can be acquired. You have to have obviously advanced degrees. But as insofar as working in the museum world, which is what I've done for over 20 years,
there's another route.
there is certainly a route there. It does not pay well. I'm just going to tell you now.
Hmm.
Um, and there are limited opportunities as to where you can ply your trade. Um, you know, World War II Museum is one. Pacific War Museum in Fredericksburg is another. My museum is one. Any other military museum, they're there, but it's difficult to get in there. I would look down the road of academia, not necessarily to become an academic, but there your employment is a little more stable, I would say. And
Hmm.
insofar as producing quality material, hey, dude, write a book, man. If you got an idea in your head, it doesn't matter. Whether you got a PhD or whatever after your name, nobody cares. If you write a good material that's well researched, it's accurate, and people want to read it, then you've contributed. Knock it
You've
out.
contributed. Yep.
Good job, guys. Guys, what do you know of Captain Russell Volkman, U.S. Army Philippines? Allegedly,
Nothing.
Yamashita surrendered to Volkman rather than MacArthur, which is why so few have heard of Volkman. Is Volkman the true father of special forces and guerrilla warfare? Thanks, David, in Augusta, Georgia. What do you guys got on that?
Nothing.
Zero.
Well,
Yep.
good thing Shawn
Jack
Bergstrom's
squat.
here. There's a
Yeah.
book called Shadow Commander, The Epic Story of Donald D. Blackburn. He is actually a guerrilla that operated in the interior of the Philippines during World War II.
Did you write that question?
No, I did not write that. But he is I've actually got on Seth's ass about doing a guerrilla warfare in the Philippines. So he is actually his counterinsurgency against the Japanese during the Second World War is looked at as the foundational
Cool.
architect of how to lead special operations behind enemy lines. So him and Volksman worked together. They were actually working together in the interior of the Philippines during the Second World War. So maybe they'll have
Awesome.
Thank you, Sean.
That's very cool. I did not know
always
that,
learning,
admittedly.
boys.
Always
Always learning,
learning.
baby.
Always learning.
Hello, I'm interested to understand what became of hard-fought islands such as Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Kwajalein once the war had officially moved on as the front progressed towards Japan. Did these islands render any support to the war effort once they became the backwater? Thanks, Dave H. in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania wants to know.
Guadalcanal became an enormous base. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the island didn't swell, but the amount of materiel and people that were there did. It became a training ground. for a lot of different divisions, not just Marine. Amphibious assault training was conducted there. It was an active air base for a long
Mhm.
time after the campaign ended.
Yep.
Um, it was a hotbed of activity for a very long time, even all the way to the end of the war till 1945. It was a logistics, what stopover, I guess maybe
Yeah.
is a proper term. Tarawa, unfortunately, it did. It was used after the capture. It was, but once we cleared the marshals, Tarawa kind of withered on the vine, on our own
Hmm.
vine. Um, but such as
Yeah.
it is.
You see similar things happening. Like our forward fleet base was at Majuro
Majuro. Yep.
in the Marshalls for I don't know 8 months or something like that. But as soon as we took Ulithi,
Yep.
or Ulithi, yeah, we just basically packed up shop on Majuro in a matter of a couple of weeks. We're like, we out, and moved everything over to Ulithi because it was closer where we needed it to be. Um, a similar story around Dobadura in New Guinea, which was, the first air base that we had close to Bunagona. That eventually sprouts into this enormous complex. I think there are 5 separate airfields there, and there's a website out there called Pacific Rex that
Hmm.
has a lot of good information.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome place.
tons of information on all these airfields that you never even know about now, but that were in places that have now been consumed by the jungle. But yeah, it's seconding what you say, Seth. Guadalcanal was a huge base. That's the reason that Guadalcanal is now the seat of the Solomon Islands government, because when we finally get done at the end of the war, there's just enormous caches of food and jeeps
Stuff.
and trucks and stuff, and so the Solomon Islanders are like, well, yeah, we're all going to move here because there's an airfield, there's stuff to
Yeah.
eat, and that's why there's a town there now.
Most of the actions that occur after Guadalcanal, and I'm talking about like New Britain, well, not necessarily New Britain, but to a point, but like Bougainville and that whole stuff that happens in 43, all the crap that is sent there comes through Guadalcanal and Tulagi.
Mm,
And it stays that way until like really we Mac takes New Guinea, and this because that's all the South Pacific Command. And once Mac takes New Guinea or most of it, or you know what I'm talking about, and moves on towards the Philippines, that's when Guadalcanal starts to become less important in terms of a staging base and more important in terms of a training base. So like First Marine Division, when they go to Peleliu or before they go to Peleliu, where do they conduct their amphibious training? Guadalcanal. So
yeah.
anyway,
So this is the last thing I'm gonna actually ask today. I'm gonna touch on. Me and John Parshall talked about this offline, Seth.
did
Um,
you?
I was fascinated with the discussion you had with McManus. Is if the uh, the Japanese empire decides we're not going to worry about the Philippines, we're not going to worry about Singapore, we're just going to go seize Hawaii. And what I was left with after listening to that episode was for a long time, I felt that that was possible. And then for a long time after talking to you, I felt like it was impossible. And then listening to the podcast, I really feel like it's a coin flip that it actually, if Japan actually used everything they could to try to seize those islands. I feel like I'm not saying they could have, I'm not saying they couldn't, but I just feel like I guess the question I have as a listener is the beaches that you both feel the Japanese 5th and 18 divisions would have landed at. If you do you feel like at 8 o'clock when the first wave's hitting Pearl Harbor, and let's say they're maybe using some of those air assets, is it possible to seize those beachheads?
It'd be pretty tough to do that on at 8 a.m. on December 7th, because how do you move
Yeah.
an 8 to 10 knot invasion fleet, you
Yeah.
know, into the southern
S-
part of the island? Although I could see them potentially showing up on like December 8th or 9th.
I would agree with that. I don't think they're ever going to get close to the island on the 7th. I don't. First of all, we would have seen them for multiple
Probably.
reasons, not the least of which is that's in the general vicinity of where we were. But regardless of that, to your point exactly, they're going to move a slow invasion fleet. We're going to see those people. I don't think they ever get ashore. I really don't. And if they do try and land, like we talked about, on the 8th or the 9th, I think they get hammered.
There's a lot of
Absolutely
our troops on those
hammered.
beaches, and as
Yeah,
you,
it's because that's where we put most of the people, 95% of the people, because exactly not to be a smartass, but they're not landing in December at Alieva. It ain't happening.
yeah,
They're not landing on the Bonsai pipeline. So they have to come down there. And
and that was
it's
one of my favorite moments from that podcast is when you
it is not.
remind me that it is not
It is not
not a
conducive.
conducive to amphibious landings on the north shore of
And
Hawaii.
and there are other areas. Like, I mean, I know, John, you've been there. Sean, have you ever been to Hawaii?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Oh, you need to go.
It's worth it.
I can be your tour guide. John and I can be your tour guides.
There you
But
go.
you go to Kaneohe and you go just north of Kaneohe. Like if you're standing on the Pali Lookout and you're looking out, and Kaneohe is over to your right, and there's that
Mhm.
whole area of coast that is
Yeah,
open. That's a potential area because
So
those
if they
beaches are
get there,
nice,
if they
nice,
get there,
soft, and slow slopers.
if they get there and it's not seen, let's just,
It's going to be
magically.
seen.
is it possible?
No, no, because it's going to be seen. I mean, you got to understand that, like McManus said, there's 70,000 plus American United States Army soldiers in the Hawaiian area, and there's probably about 60,000,
More
65,000 on
people in
Oahu alone.
Singapore, man. There's more people in the Philippines.
Yeah, but they landed,
The
500 miles away from Singapore.
well,
That's the issue there.
that's part of it, and then the military complex in Oahu is far different than the military complex in Malaya. I'm sorry. I mean, the amount of crap that was there. I just don't see it happening. And I think if they get ashore, 24th and 25th, eat those people alive.
I don't think so, bro. I don't think so. They have
Bullshit.
zero military experience. The 5th and 18th are the best divisions they've been fighting in China. I don't think that's
Completely
over.
completely disagree because the NCO, the cadre, a lot of the senior officers were career military men. They'd spent 20, 30 years in the army. That was the only thing they knew. Those were professional soldiers. They were going to whoop that ass all day long.
I don't think
All
so.
day long. No, I
I
totally
don't think
agree.
so.
Nope.
Fascinating.
Anyway,
It's good to end on a note of conflict. I think that's
I love
that's
that,
great
right?
job. I like it.
Hey guys, absolutely loved it. Great
Yeah,
job
it was fun.
today, as
Super fun.
always. Appreciate you letting me come in and MC. I will
We
relinquish.
got more. We got more. We got what, two more at least?
Dude, I can honestly, I've got at least 3 more.
Ugh.
What,
We have a
what
lot
was
of
that? I
religions.
thought you enjoyed doing this, man.
I do. It's just like, man, it blows my mind that there's that much stuff
I
to
give
talk
you
about.
guys a break. I mean, you guys can take some time off.
Nah, we'll do some more. We got, what is this? What the hell is today? I don't even know what today is. The 21st of November. So we got next week's Thanksgiving, and then we're getting up into Christmas. So we'll probably do maybe one or so during the Christmas holidays or something. Just
Yeah,
no
Yeah.
prep, easy peasy.
yeah.
All right,
Good stuff.
Sean, do I have control of this here ship?
Seth, you have the con.
There we go. All right. So with that, we want to thank you very much for listening and/or watching to this episode of the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War. Give us a rating and review. We do appreciate it. Once again, my name is Seth Paridon. I want to thank you very much for listening and/or watching. Sean, my brother, as always, ouch. Thank you for being the MC of this here show. We greatly appreciate it. And to the Nerderati, thank you very much for the questions. You guys
Great
are
questions,
freaking awesome.
right?
Great
Man.
questions. Super fun.
Damn,
Yeah,
you guys are awesome.
yeah.
Stepping
Really good
up.
questions.
All
Thanks
right,
so much
John.
to everybody
Let's go.
for hanging out with us again. We really enjoy it. Glad that you enjoy it too. And we'll see you again next week. Take care. Happy Turkey Day.